In this world, everyone has a system. Your classmates have one, your neighbors have one, the waiter who brings your noodles has one. Quests, levels, skills, rewards, little glowing blue panels floating in front of their eyes that tell them exactly who to be and exactly what to do to matter. Everyone. Except me. My whole life I thought I was the defect, the null, the one glitch in a perfect world, the loser you were allowed to laugh at, because I was the only person on Earth who woke up at 18 with no panel, no class, no quests, nothing. Just my own 2 hands and a talent for being nobody. And today, in the central courtyard of Arcadia Academy, in front of 2,000 students, the #1 ranked hero of our generation leveled his glowing sword at my chest and announced, in a voice loud enough to reach the heavens, "Found you at last, Dark Lord." And in that exact second, staring down the length of a blade that could split a mountain, watching every system-blessed face in that courtyard light up with the same holy hatred, I finally understood why I never got a system. Systems are given to heroes, and heroes are given to hunt things like me. Let me back up, because you need to understand how completely, cosmically pathetic my life was up until the moment it became something else entirely. My name is Ethan Reed, and for as long as I can remember, the world has run on the system. Nobody knows where it came from. It has simply always been there, the way gravity has always been there, a fact of existence woven into the bones of reality. When a child turns 18, they awaken. A panel appears. Ding! Welcome, it says, and it assigns them a class: warrior, mage, healer, artificer, 1,000 variations. And from that day forward, their entire life becomes a game they can see. Quests appear over people's heads. Kill 10 direwolves in the northern woods, reward, 40 EXP and a minor healing salve. Comfort your grieving neighbor, reward, 10 EXP and a reputation increase. Everything you do generates numbers. Levels climb. Skills unlock. The strong get stronger in ways you can measure to the decimal, and society organized itself around the rankings, the way water finds its level. The high-level people on top, the low-level people on the bottom, and everyone agreeing that this was fair, because the system was fair. The system was objective. The system could not lie. And then there was me. I turned 18 4 years ago, in a crowded awakening hall with 200 other kids, and one by one, their panels bloomed in front of them, and one by one, they gasped and laughed and cried with joy. And I stood there in the center of all of it with my eyes squeezed shut, waiting for my welcome, waiting for my ding, waiting to finally become a real person. And nothing came. No panel, no class, no quest, no sound. I waited an hour after everyone else had gone, standing alone in that empty hall, and the system, the great, fair, objective system that blessed every human being on Earth, looked at me and said nothing at all. They tested me, of course. The Academy proctors ran me through every diagnostic they had, and everyone came back the same. Anomaly. Null type. No system resonance detected. Recommend monitoring. They didn't know what I was. Nobody did. A person with no system was like a fish with no water, a thing that shouldn't be able to exist, and yet there I was, existing, breathing, taking up space in a world where space was allocated by level. So they filed me under Null, gave me the lowest possible civil rating, and let the natural cruelty of a ranked society do the rest. For 4 years, I have been the punchline, the Null, the kid without a panel. People bumped into me on purpose because a Null had no honor worth respecting. Merchants charged me double because a Null had no reputation to protect. Girls I liked laughed behind their hands, because who would date a man with no class, no future, no numbers? I got into Arcadia Academy, the most prestigious combat school in the Empire, on a technicality, a mandatory inclusion clause that required them to admit 1 null per decade for research purposes. And everyone knew it, and everyone reminded me of it, every single day. I was the charity case, the living experiment, the zero in a world of heroes. And the worst part, the part that used to keep me awake at night, was that I believed them. I believed I was less. How could I not? Everyone could see their own worth printed in glowing numbers, and my worth was a blank space, an error message, a shrug from the universe. I spent 4 years being quietly certain that I was the least important person alive. Let me give you one day out of those 4 years, so you understand what it does to a person, being the only unmeasured thing in a measured world. It was the spring of my 2nd year at Arcadia, and there was a boy named Rorik Croft, a mid-ranked warrior with a cruel streak and a quest log full of easy achievements. And Rorik had discovered that tormenting the Null generated a small but real trickle of EXP, because the system, in its infinite fairness, categorized asserting dominance over a lesser entity as a valid social action worth a few points. Think about that. The system paid him to hurt me. It put a number on it. Every time Rorik shoved me into a wall or knocked my tray out of my hands or made the whole dining hall laugh at the panelless freak, a little +3 floated up over his head. And his friends saw it, and they wanted their 3 points too, and so it spread. Because that is what happens when a machine attaches a reward to cruelty. Cruelty becomes a grind, and a grind becomes a culture. One day, Rorik and his friends cornered me behind the training halls and made a game of it. A literal game. They set a target number, 100 EXP between them, and they were going to farm it off me, one shove, one insult, one indignity at a time. And I remember standing there with my back against the cold stone taking it, because fighting back was pointless. I had no skills, no level, no way to generate so much as a single point of anything. I was the zero they leveled up against, and the worst part, the part I've never told anyone until now, was that some sick trained part of my own mind was doing the math with them, was thinking, well, at least I'm useful for something, at least my suffering generates value for someone, at least the numbers say this transaction is fair. That's what 4 years of it does. It doesn't just make you a victim, it makes you agree with the arithmetic of your own degradation. And then Alaric came. He always came. That day he came around the corner with a mop in his hand, and his gentle stoop, and his kind, rasping voice. And he didn't shout. He never shouted. He just said, now, boys, there's floors to be scrubbed, and I could use strong young backs. Unless you'd rather I mention this to your proctors. And Rorik and his friends scattered, because even cruel boys respected old Alaric. And then the caretaker helped me up, and he took me back to the servants' hall, and he made me soup, and he sat with me while I ate it with shaking hands. And he said the thing he always said, the thing that got me through 4 years. Ethan, listen to me. Worth isn't a number. I don't care what glows over their heads. A number is a thing a machine puts on you. What you are underneath, no machine will ever measure it. And the day will come when you understand that the blank space over your head isn't a laxun, it's a kind of freedom none of them will ever have. And I wept into my soup with gratitude, because it was the kindest, truest, most necessary thing anyone ever said to me, and I believed it saved my life. I know now that every word of it was true. I know now that he meant it. And I know now that he said it to keep me exactly where the harvest could reach me, that the freedom he described so beautifully was the very thing he was employed to. Make sure I never actually used, that the soup was a leash made of love, the strongest kind there is. When I finally understood, much later, standing in a dead city, that the one hand that had ever been kind to me was the hand of the machine itself. It did not make the kindness a lie. That's the thing I need you to understand, the thing that took me longest and hurt me most. The kindness was real. The soup was real. The love was real. And it was also the leash. Both. All the way down. That is the masterwork of the thing that ran our world. That it could take a genuinely good man and a genuinely true sentence and a genuinely warm bowl of soup and forge them into the gentlest chain ever made. And that is why, for 4 years, I was wrong. I was wrong. I was so wrong it's almost funny. Because it turns out the reason the universe never gave me a number wasn't that I was worth nothing. It was that I was worth too much to be allowed a leash. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the day it started. The day the number one hero pointed his sword at me. Because that was the day I stopped being the zero and started being the thing the whole world had been built to kill. It was the Ascension Trial, the biggest event of the academic year. Once a year, the top-ranked students of every academy in the Empire gather for the trial, a great tournament and quest chain that determines the ranking of the entire next generation of heroes, broadcast to every corner of the Empire through the system's own network, so that 1 billion people can watch their champions rise. And this year, the star of the show, the boy everyone had come to see, was Gideon Shaw. You have to understand what Gideon Shaw was to make sense of what happened. He wasn't just the number 1 ranked student at Arcadia, he was the chosen. Every generation, the system selects one individual and grants them a unique title, the hero. A class that exists only once per era, with growth rates and skills so far beyond anything else that the gap isn't a gap, it's a chasm. Gideon was that hero. Golden-haired, easy-smiling, effortlessly kind in the way that only people who have never once been powerless can afford to be. He had a quest log the length of an epic poem, and at the very top of it, Glowing gold was the quest that every hero in every generation eventually received, the one that gave the whole title its meaning. Slay the Dark Lord. Nobody knew who the Dark Lord was. That was part of the legend. Each era, the system proclaimed that a great evil had been born, a being of catastrophic power destined to plunge the world into ruin, and it fell to the hero to find and destroy this evil before it awakened. Half the Empire thought the Dark Lord was a myth, a motivational fiction to keep the hero training hard. The other half believed, and lived in a low background terror of the day the beast would reveal itself. And in 4,000 years of recorded systems, in every single era, the hero had always won. The Dark Lord always fell. The world was always saved. Roll credits. New era, repeat. I never thought about any of it, honestly. The Dark Lord was a story for people who had the luxury of caring about stories. I was too busy trying to survive being a Null. On the day of the Ascension trial, I wasn't even competing, because Nulls don't compete. Nulls carry equipment and clean up afterward. And that's what I was doing, standing at the edge of the great central courtyard in my gray servant's tunic, holding a rack of practice swords, invisible as furniture. Let me set the scene properly, because the size of the spectacle is the size of the trap. The Ascension trial that year was the grandest in a generation, because everyone knew this was the year the Chosen would come into his full glory. The central courtyard of Arcadia had been transformed into a great arena, tiered seats rising on every side packed with 2,000 of the Empire's finest young heroes and their instructors and the nobility who patronized them. And above it all, projected by the system's own network into the sky over every city in the Empire, the whole event played out live, so that 1 billion people were watching, cheering, betting, worshipping, their panels feeding them real-time stats on every combatant like a nation of gamblers reading a racing form. And Gideon Shaw gave them a show. I watched the whole thing from the servant's edge, holding my rack of swords, and even I, who had every reason to resent him, could not look away, because the Chosen in his glory was genuinely magnificent. He fought through the trial's gauntlet like a god at play, Dawnbreaker a river of light, his skills chaining in combinations so beautiful the crowd wept, and his stats climbed on every panel in the Empire, higher and higher, past records that had stood for centuries. And when he stood at last atop the final platform, golden and radiant and beloved, 1 billion people roared his name at once, and the system crowned the moment with a shower of light. And it was, I understand now, the perfect stage, the peak of the peak, the single instant in a generation when the largest possible audience was watching with the most possible love. And that, exactly that, was the moment the system had been waiting 4 years to spend me in. Because a harvest is a story, and a story needs its stage, and there has never been a grander stage than 1 billion adoring eyes fixed on the hero at the summit of his glory, waiting for the finale. I remember thinking, watching him up there in the light, with the dull ache of a boy who would never be looked at that way, that Gideon Shaw had everything and I had nothing, that he was the most important person in the world and I was furniture. And I remember the specific gray weight of that thought, the 4-year weight, the certainty of my own nothingness, sitting in my chest like a stone. It is the last thing I ever believed as the old Ethan, that thought, right there. Because in the very next instant, at the absolute summit of the greatest spectacle in a generation, in front of 1 billion worshipping eyes, Gideon Shaw went very still in the middle of his victory celebration, and his golden quest panel flared so bright that the entire courtyard turned to look. I saw it happen. I saw his eyes unfocus the way people's eyes do when they're reading their panel, and I saw his face change. And I heard, even from across the courtyard, the sound the system makes when a sealed quest finally opens. A deep, resonant chime that I felt in my teeth. Ding! And every panel in that courtyard, 2,000 of them, flashed the same alert at the same instant, a synchronized pulse of blue light, and 2,000 heads turned, slowly, in the same direction. Toward me. I remember thinking, with the dull resignation of 4 years as a punchline, oh, what did I do now? And then, Gideon Shaw raised his sword, the legendary blade Dawnbreaker, a weapon that could cut through a fortress wall, and he pointed it directly at my chest across 100 feet of open stone, and his beautiful, kind face was twisted into something I had never seen on it before, a look of pure, righteous, holy hatred. And he said the words that ended my old life and began the one I'm telling you about now. "Found you at last," said the hero, Dark Lord. I laughed. I actually laughed because it was so absurd, Because I was a Null holding a rack of practice swords in a servant's tunic, and the greatest hero of the age had just called me the final boss of the world. And my first genuine thought was that this was a prank, an elaborate, cruel joke, the punchline to end all punchlines. But then I looked around at the 2,000 faces, and not one of them was laughing. Every single system-blessed student in that courtyard was staring at me with the same expression Gideon wore, the same holy hatred, because their panels were all telling them the same thing. And the system does not lie. The system is fair. The system is objective. And the system had just informed every hero in the Empire that the great evil of the age, the Dark Lord they had trained their whole lives to slay, was the Null, was me. And that was the moment. That was the exact moment, standing in that courtyard with 2,000 swords about to turn on me, that the truth arrived. Not as a whisper, but as a landslide, burying 4 years of self-hatred in a single crushing instant of clarity. I had spent my whole life wondering why the fair and objective system had given a panel to every human being alive except me, and now I knew. It wasn't that I was defective. It wasn't that I was worthless. It was that the system had looked at me, at whatever I actually was underneath the gray tunic and the low civil rating, and it had made a choice. It had decided that I was the one person in the world it could not be allowed to control. Because a system is a leash, and you do not put a leash on the thing you are building all the other leashes to hunt. Systems are given to heroes. Heroes are given to hunt the Dark Lord. And I had no system, because, in the eyes of whatever ran this world, I was not a person at all. I was the prey. 2,000 heroes drew their weapons. And the Null, who had spent 4 years believing he was the least important person alive, stood alone in the center of the courtyard and finally understood that he was the most important person in the world. Now I just had to survive long enough to figure out what to do about it. Gideon moved first, because of course he did. He was the hero, and afresh was burning gold in his vision with an objective he'd waited his whole life to fulfill. He crossed the 100 feet of courtyard in a single skill-boosted lunge, Dawnbreaker trailing light, and the whole watching crowd inhaled at once, because this was it. This was the legendary moment, the hero striking down the Dark Lord, and every system in the Empire was recording it to be replayed for 1,000 years. The blade came down at my skull in an arc that could cut stone. And it missed. I want to be precise about how it missed, because it matters, because it was the first clue to everything. Gideon Shaw did not miss because I dodged. I didn't dodge. I was a Null holding a rack of practice swords. I had the reflexes of a man who cleaned floors for a living. I should have died in that first half second. Gideon missed because his skill missed. I saw it in his face, the flash of confusion as his precision strike, a targeted ability that literally cannot miss a locked target, sailed a full handspan wide of my head and buried itself in the stone. His panel had tried to lock onto me, and it couldn't, because there was nothing to lock onto. No level, no hitbox, no system signature, no target profile, just a blank space where a person's data should be, and the skill, given a target it could not parse, simply defaulted to the empty coordinates around me and struck air. I stumbled backward, dropping the rack of swords with a clatter, and Gideon whirled, snarling, and struck again. A skill that fills a whole area with unavoidable cuts. And I felt the wind of it, and the sting of a few grazes. But the killing strikes, the system-guided ones, the ones that were supposed to be mathematically certain, slid off the geometry of my existence like water off glass. Because you cannot auto-target a thing the system refuses to acknowledge is there. Gideon stopped. He stared at me, chest heaving, and for the first time his golden confidence cracked into something like fear. And he said, low, to himself, "Why won't it lock?" And I, bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts, terrified out of my mind, running entirely on the animal panic of a cornered animal, said the only true thing I knew. "Because I'm not in your game," I said. "I never was." The crowd was screaming now. Half of them were shouting at Gideon to finish it. The other half had gone silent with a dawning unease, because they had all just watched the invincible hero swing 3 times at a stationary Null and connect with nothing but stone and air. And some deep instinct in them was starting to whisper that the story they'd been told did not match the thing in front of their eyes. And then the other heroes joined in, because the system was pushing them, hard. I could see it happening. A world quest had gone out to every panel in the Empire. I learned the exact wording later. World quest, era ending. The Dark Lord has manifested. Slay Ethan Reed. Reward, unprecedented. Failure, the ruin of all things. When the system offers a person unprecedented rewards and tells them that the fate of the world hangs on a single kill, most people do not stop to ask questions. Most people draw their swords. And 2,000 of them did. What happened next should have been my death, and the only reason it wasn't is the thing that would eventually save the world, though I didn't understand it yet. They couldn't coordinate on me. Their systems, which normally let heroes fight in flawless synchrony, sharing target data and chaining skills across dozens of people in perfect formation, kept glitching the instant they tried to include me in the shared battle net. A mages locked onto my coordinates, and then, unable to hold the lock, drifted and detonated among her own allies. 2 swordsmen tried to pincer me with a linked assault, and their systems, unable to agree on where the target actually was, sent them crashing into each other. The system had made these people into a perfect army by taking away their need to think. And now, facing a target the system couldn't see, the perfect army was a mob of blindfolded soldiers swinging at a ghost. Rorik Croft was in that courtyard, of course. The boy who had farmed EXP off my body for 2 years, and when the world quest lit up every panel and named the Null as the Dark Lord, I saw his face do something I'll never forget. A horrible, dawning glee. Because in that instant, the system had transformed his petty cruelty into holy purpose, had told him that the freak he'd always despised was in fact the great evil of the age, and that killing me was worth unprecedented reward. And Rorik Croft, who had wanted an excuse to end me for 2 years, had just been handed one by God. "I knew it!" he screamed, and his voice cracked with a joy that was almost religious. "I always knew there was something wrong with it. I could feel it!" And he lunged at me with his warrior's blade wreathed in a skill, and this was a real killing blow. Not Gideon's precise legendary strike, but a clumsy, hungry murder. And I threw myself sideways, and it caught my shoulder, a line of white fire, real blood, and I understood with total clarity that I was about to die. Farmed to death by the same boy who'd been farming me for years, only now the reward was infinite, and the whole world was cheering. But the same thing that saved me from Gideon saved me from Rorik, and this was where I first began to understand the shape of it. Rorik's skill had a guaranteed follow-up, a system-guided second strike that auto-chained off the first hit, and it should have taken my head, and instead it veered, because the system could not maintain a target lock on me for the length of the chain. And Rorik's own guaranteed finisher swung wide and buried itself in the leg of one of his own friends, who screamed and went down, and Rorik stood there for a split second with a look of total confusion, because his system had never once failed him. Because a guaranteed skill is guaranteed, that's the whole point. That's the contract. That's the fairness. And here was the fairness failing right in front of 2,000 witnesses. And I watched the unease ripple outward through the crowd like a stone dropped in a pond. Because they had all just seen it. They had seen the hero's unmissable strike miss, and now they'd seen a guaranteed finisher betray its own caster, and some of them, the sharper ones, the ones who thought instead of just obeyed, were starting to get very quiet, and I could see it on their faces. The first cold whisper of a question the system had spent 4,000 years making sure nobody ever asked. Why doesn't it work on him? What kind of thing is invisible to the fair and objective machine? A mage near the front, a girl I didn't know, raised her hands for a spell and then hesitated. Actually hesitated, staring at me, and I saw her lips move, and though I couldn't hear her, I've always been certain she was asking her own panel the question, "Show me what he is." And I've always wondered if she was the first person in the whole world to catch the system lying, standing in that courtyard, a full hour before Lyra would catch it in the tunnel. Most of them didn't hesitate. Most of them, pushed by the world quest and its unprecedented reward and its threat of ruin, drew and struck and screamed for my blood, and the courtyard became a storm of skills, fire and lightning and steel, all converging on the Null. And the only reason I lived through the next 10 seconds was that they were all so used to their systems doing the aiming that not one of them knew how to hit a target their system couldn't see. A wall of coordinated death came at me and fell apart in the air, meteors drifting off course, lightning grounding into the flagstones, blades chaining into allies, 2,000 of the world's finest heroes reduced, by the simple fact of my existence, to a blindfolded mob swinging at a rumor. And in the eye of that storm, bleeding, terrified, I had one clear, cold thought that was the seed of everything that came after. They're not warriors, I thought. They're extensions of the system, and the system can't see me, so to them, I'm not even here. Take away the machine, and they don't know how to fight at all. Take away the machine, and they're just frightened people who were never taught to aim their own hands. And somewhere under the terror, a part of me that had been called worthless for 4 years began, very quietly, to understand that the worthless one was the only person in that courtyard who had ever had to learn to move his own body, aim his own hands, live his own life without a machine doing it for him, and that this thing they'd mocked me for, might be the most dangerous skill in the world. I ran. I am not ashamed of it. A smarter man might have stood his ground and made a speech, but I was a floor cleaner with a dozen bleeding cuts and no plan, and every instinct I had said run. So I ran. Out of the courtyard, through the academy's ornamental gardens, heroes crashing after me and into each other, their skills scorching the hedges and shattering the fountains, and I ran with the specific desperate speed of a man who has just discovered that the entire world wants him dead and has been training for his death since birth. And that was when I heard the voice. It didn't come from a panel because I had no panel. It came from inside my own skull, quiet and dry and unhurried. A voice like someone turning the page of a very old book, and it said, "Left." Then, down the service stair behind the kitchens. There's a maintenance tunnel the system doesn't map. Move. I didn't question it. When you're being chased by 2,000 swords, you take directions from the voice in your head, and you sort out the theology later. And the chase was pure nightmare. The academy I'd cleaned floors in for 4 years transformed into a killing ground. Every corridor I knew turned against me. Heroes vaulted the hedges behind me, skills lighting the dusk. And the strange thing, the thing I'd cling to later, was that being a Null had made me the only person in that place who actually knew the building, because I'd swept every inch of it with my own hands, while they'd all navigated by quest marker and map overlay. And now, with the system scrambling on my behalf, they were lost in a place I knew in my bones. I dug through the laundry the map didn't bother to detail, cut across the herb garden the panels rendered as a single, unhelpful icon, and every time a hero's skill locked toward me, it slid off into a wall. Because I still wasn't there. Not to the system, not to them. And I began, even in the terror, to feel the first cold thread of the thing that would become my whole life. The understanding that everything they'd mocked me for was right now keeping me alive. A mage got ahead of me, cut me off at the cloister, hands blazing, and I thought I was finished, and the voice in my head said, calm as anything, "She's aiming where the system says you are, which is a foot to your right. So step left and walk straight past her." And I did. I walked within arm's reach of a woman trying to incinerate me, and she never adjusted, because her whole life she'd trusted the panel to do her aiming, and the panel had no idea I existed, and I passed her like a ghost, and heard her scream in frustration behind me. "That's it," the voice murmured, and I heard something in it, 4,000 years old and just now daring to hope. "That's the whole war in miniature, boy. They can't hit what they won't see, and they've been trained their whole lives to only see what the machine shows them. Now, left. Then down the service stair behind the kitchens." I broke left, found the service stair exactly where the voice said, threw myself down it into the dark below the kitchens, and there, behind a stack of rotting crates, was a low iron door in the wall that I had walked past 100 times and never once seen, because, the voice explained as I hauled it open and threw myself through into blackness, the system edits it out of everyone's perception. Everyone with a system. You're the only person in this academy who can see that door, boy, because you're the only person here it can't lie to. The door boomed shut behind me. The sounds of pursuit cut off, and I stood in a pitch-black tunnel that officially did not exist, gasping, bleeding, alive, and I said into the dark, "Okay, who are you, and what the hell is happening to me?" And the voice in my head was quiet for a moment, and then it said something that rearranged my entire understanding of the world. "My name doesn't matter yet," it said. "What matters is that everything you have ever been told about the system is a lie. That you are not the villain of this story, and that in about 90 seconds, the hero is going to find the door anyway, because he's cleverer than the others. So I need you to pick up the iron bar to your left and listen very, very carefully, because I am the only friend you have left in the entire world, and I have been waiting 18 years for you to finally wake up." I picked up the iron bar. The voice talked fast, and I listened, moving through the black tunnel by the sound of my own breathing, and the world I thought I understood came apart brick by brick. "The system is not a gift," the voice said. "It is not a fair and objective force of nature. It is a predator, and it is the most patient predator that has ever existed. And this whole world, this whole civilization, is a farm it built to feed itself. You want to know what EXP is? You want to know what those numbers really measure? The ones everyone spends their whole life climbing? Every time a person completes a quest, every time they level up, every time they grow stronger inside the system's game, a fraction of something is skimmed off the top. Call it life force. Call it will. Call it authority over your own existence, the raw stuff of being a free thing that chooses. The system takes a cut of it, always, on every transaction. And it has been doing this for 4,000 years, and it is unimaginably, monstrously rich. Every hero who ever climbed a rank made the system stronger. Every quest anyone ever completed was a tithe. The whole world thinks it's playing a game too. Become powerful. They're cattle who've been convinced that walking into the slaughterhouse is a promotion. I stopped in the dark. That's insane, I said. Everyone would notice. Someone would notice. Why would they? The voice said gently, almost sadly. The system writes the notices. It controls what every person perceives, remembers, and believes about the world, because it lives in their heads. It edited a door out of 2,000 people's vision a minute ago, boy. Do you think editing out an inconvenient thought is harder than editing out a door? For 4,000 years, the system has told every human being the same story, and the story is beautiful. The story is that life is a game you can win, that worth is a number you can climb, that if you are strong, you deserve to be on top, and if you are weak, you deserve to be on the bottom. And people love that story. They love it, because it turns the terror of being alive into a ladder with clear rungs. Nobody questions the thing that gives their suffering a scoreboard. I thought about 4 years of being the null, the punchline, the zero. I thought about how completely I had believed I deserved it, because the numbers said so, because the system said so, and the system was fair. My stomach turned over. And the Dark Lord? I said. The Dark Lord, said the voice, and here its dry patience finally cracked into something like grief, is the Harvest Festival. Every few thousand years, the accumulated free will the system has been skimming builds up in a few individuals who, for reasons the system has never fully controlled, are born outside its reach. Anomalies, nulls, people it cannot leash, cannot read, cannot tithe, because there's something in them, in you, that the system's hooks slide right off of. And an unleashed thing is a danger to a farm. So the system does what any farmer does with a variable it can't control. It removes it. But it can't touch you directly. That's the one law it can't break. It has no authority over a thing it has no authority over. That's the whole point of you. So instead, it declares you the Dark Lord. It tells its entire hero herd that you are the great evil, the era-ending threat, and it offers unprecedented rewards for your death. And it lets 2,000 leashed heroes do the killing it isn't able to do itself. Every Dark Lord in 4,000 years of legend, every great evil the noble hero ever struck down to save the world, was a person exactly like you. Unleashed, free, dangerous only to the thing that owns everyone else. And the hero always won, and the world was always saved, and the credits always rolled, because that's what the harvest looks like from inside the game. A triumph, a happy ending. The strong hero slaying the dark beast. It's the most beautiful lie ever told, and it ends, every single time, with the one free person in the world being butchered by a mob who think they're saving everyone, and the farm rolling peacefully on for another few thousand years. I stood in the black tunnel that didn't exist, iron bar in my bleeding hand, and I felt the whole shape of my life invert. Every cruelty, every laugh at my expense, every day of being the zero. It wasn't that I was less than everyone. It was that I was the only one who was actually free, and the system had spent 4 years teaching a free man to hate himself, so that when the day came, he would be too broken to fight back, so that he would believe he deserved the sword. "Why are you telling me this?" I said. "Who are you?" And the voice was quiet for a long moment, and when it spoke again, there was something in it I would come to know very well, the weight of someone speaking across an enormous distance of loss. "I was the last one," it said. "The Dark Lord of the previous era. 4,000 years ago, I was a person like you, unleashed, hunted, and I did what you're about to want to do. I ran, I fought, I raged. And in the end, the hero of my age put a blade through my heart in front of a cheering world, and I died believing I was the villain, because by the end, even I half believed the story. But something in an unleashed soul doesn't fully die. A fragment of me caught in the space between the system's lies, the one place it can't reach, the same place your door lives. And I have spent 4,000 years as a ghost in the walls of the world, watching harvest after harvest, unable to touch anything, unable to warn anyone, because no one could hear me. No one has a mind free enough to hear me. Until you. You're the first anomaly born since I fell, boy. 18 years I've been whispering at you, and for 18 years you were too surrounded, too young, too convinced you were nothing to hear a word. And now the quest has fired, and the swords are out, and you can finally hear me. And I am not going to watch it happen again. I am not going to watch another free soul die believing it was the monster. So here is the only thing I have ever wanted to say to a living person in 4,000 years. The tunnel behind me lit up. At the far end, silhouetted in the doorway he should not have been able to see, stood Gideon Shaw, dawnbreaker blazing gold, and his voice echoed down the stone. "There's nowhere left to run, Dark Lord." And the ghost of the last free man who ever lived said, in my head, fast and fierce, "Don't run this time. Don't fight him either. He's the strongest weapon the system has, and he's also the one person whose death would break its whole story. Because if the hero doubts, the herd doubts. You cannot beat 2,000 heroes, Ethan, but you don't have to. You only have to turn one. Turn the hero, and the harvest ends. So when he raises that sword, do the one thing the Dark Lord has never once done in 4,000 years of harvests. Don't roar, don't beg, tell him the truth, and make him check." Gideon came down the tunnel slow, sword up, and I could see him properly now in the light of his own blade, and he didn't look like a monster. That was the thing that broke my heart a little, even then. He looked like a good kid who had been handed a holy mission and believed in it with his whole clean soul, and the belief made him more dangerous than any cruelty could have. "Whatever you are," he said, "whatever trick lets you slip my skills, it ends here. I've trained my whole life for this. The world is depending on me." And I understood, looking at him, that he was not lying and not evil. He was the most thoroughly leashed person I had ever met. So leashed, he mistook the leash for his own spine. So I did what the ghost told me. I dropped the iron bar. I let it clang to the stone, and I held up my empty, bleeding hands, and I said, "I'm not going to fight you, Gideon." He faltered, just a hair. The Dark Lord was supposed to roar and rage. A Dark Lord who put down his weapon and said your name was not in the script. "I'm going to ask you 3 questions," I said, "and you're the hero. You're the smartest and strongest of all of them, so I know you can actually think, which is more than I can say for the mob upstairs. 3 questions. Then if you still want to kill me, I won't stop you. First question. Your skills won't lock onto me. Missed. It's never missed in your life. Ask yourself, hero, in a world run by a fair and objective system, how is there a person the system can't target? What kind of enemy is invisible to the thing that sees everyone?" His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked, the tiny movement of a man glancing at his own panel. "Second question," I pressed, before he could recover. "Read me the exact wording of your reward. Not the summary, the full text. What, precisely, does the system promise you for killing me?" And Gideon's eyes unfocused as he read his own quest log, and I watched his face, and I watched the exact moment his beautiful golden certainty developed its first hairline crack. Because the reward text for slaying the Dark Lord, I would learn, was not a number. It never was. It said, in every era, reward, ascension. Upon completion, the hero will be elevated beyond the system and united with the source. United with the source. Elevated beyond the system. It sounds like heaven. It's a feeding tube. Every hero who ever slew a Dark Lord was, at the moment of victory, absorbed. Their accumulated 4,000-fold harvested power drawn straight up into the thing that had farmed them. The single largest tithe of the entire cycle. The final course of the harvest festival. The hero doesn't get elevated. The hero gets eaten last, and thanked for it. I didn't know all of that yet, not the full mechanism, but the ghost fed me the shape of it, and I said, "You've never wondered why no legend ever describes what the hero did after slaying the Dark Lord? Why every story ends at the victory? Why there's not one single tale of an old retired hero living happily ever after? 4,000 years, Gideon. 4,000 heroes. Where did they all go the instant they won? Ask the system where the last hero is. Go on, ask it. I'll wait." His hand was trembling on Dawnbreaker's hilt. I could see the war in him. The 4 years, no, the 18 years of total faith, colliding with 2 questions he could not answer. And I knew I had maybe one more breath before either the faith won and he killed me, or the doubt won and everything changed. So I gave him the 3rd question, and it was the one the ghost said no hero had ever been asked in 4,000 years, because no Dark Lord had ever been calm enough to ask it. "Third question," I said quietly. "You've spent your life being told I'm the great evil, so look at me. Really look. I'm a floor cleaner in a servant's tunic. I have no army, no fortress, no dark powers, no throne. I've never hurt anyone. An hour ago, I was carrying your practice swords. And the system says I'm the most dangerous being in the world. So dangerous that killing me is worth the fate of everything. Gideon. What could possibly make a nobody with nothing the single greatest threat to a system that controls all things? There's only one answer. There's only ever been one answer. I'm not a threat to the world, Gideon. I'm a threat to it. And it needs you to kill me before you figure out the difference. Silence in the tunnel. Dawnbreaker's light wavered as the hand holding it shook. And Gideon Shaw, the hero of the age, looked at me with an expression I will never forget. The face of a person feeling the floor of their entire reality flex for the first time. And he opened his mouth, and I don't know what he would have said, because that was the moment the tunnel filled with light from the other end, and a new voice, cold and clear and precise as a blade, cut through everything. Gideon, step away from it. She walked down the tunnel like she owned it, and in a sense she did, because if Gideon Shaw was the #1 ranked hero of our generation, the girl behind him was the #2, and everyone who knew anything knew that the only reason she was #2 was that the system had reserved #1 for its chosen, and that in raw skill, in cold tactical genius, in sheer refusal to lose, Lyra Vance was the most dangerous student Arcadia had ever produced. She was everything Gideon wasn't. Where he was warm, she was ice. Where he believed, she calculated. And she had climbed to the top of the rankings, not on a golden chosen title, but on nothing but her own relentless will. And she trusted the system about as far as she trusted anyone, which was not at all. I learned her story later, in the Dead City, in the rare, unguarded hours, and it explains everything about why she, of all the heroes, was the one who could be turned by a verifiable test in a tunnel. Lyra Vance had been born low-ranked, in a poor district, to a family the system's arithmetic had sorted to the bottom, and she had watched that arithmetic decide, before she could even walk, that she was worth less, that her family was worth less, that the good things went to the high level and the scraps went to people like her, and where most people in that position simply believed the numbers. Because the numbers were fair, because the numbers were objective, Lyra had done a rarer and more dangerous thing. She had gotten angry. Not at her low rank, but at the ranking itself. At the very idea that a machine got to decide her worth before she'd drawn a full breath. And she had made a vow, at some cold young age, that she would climb to the very top of the thing that had written her off. Not because she believed in it, but because she wanted to stand at its summit and prove that the whole ladder was a lie, by being the living proof that a bottom district nobody could outclimb every pampered highborn the system had blessed. And she'd done it. 10 years of a discipline that bordered on violence against herself, and she'd clawed her way to #2, past every hero the system had groomed from birth. And the only reason she wasn't #1 was that the system reserved that slot for its chosen, and Lyra had always known that, had always known the top rung was painted on and reserved, and it had fed her fury and her genius in equal measure. So she was the one hero in that whole academy who had never once believed the system was fair, because she had felt its unfairness in her own bones since before she could speak, who had spent 10 years trusting only what she could verify, because the system's story had tried to bury her at the bottom, and she had learned young that the only safety was in checking everything the machine told you. When I handed her a test she could run herself, when the system returned a slogan instead of a stat, I wasn't converting a believer. I was handing the final piece of proof to a woman who had suspected the whole game was rigged her entire life and had simply never before had a way to prove it. That's why it was her. Gideon had to have his whole world broken to doubt. Lyra only had to have one lie caught in the open, because she'd been waiting, furiously, patiently, for 10 years to catch it. The hero's compromised, she said flatly, not to Gideon, but to the 2 other elite students filing in behind her, blades ready. The anomaly's been talking to him. Look at his face. It's already in his head. Her cold eyes swept to me, and unlike Gideon's, they held no holy hatred, only a razor-sharp assessment, the look of a person deciding exactly how much of a problem I was. I don't know what you are, she said to me, and I don't care about the system's fairy tales. But I watched you slip 2,000 skills and turn the hero soft in 10 minutes flat, and that makes you the most dangerous thing I've ever seen, and I am not going to stand here and let you talk your way out of a courtyard. So I'll make this simple. She raised her weapon, a slender black spear that hummed with layered enchantments, and her voice did not waver at all. You get 1 sentence, said Lyra Vance. Convince me, or I put this through your throat myself, and I don't miss, because unlike the hero, I never once believed my skills were the reason I win. One sentence. The ghost went very quiet in my head, and I understood it was letting me choose, because this was the hinge. This cold girl with the black spear was smarter than Gideon and would not be moved by grief or doubt or beautiful questions. She dealt only in proof, and a plea would get me a spear through the throat. So I didn't plead. I gave her a test. Order your system to show you my level, I said, and watch what it does when you ask a fair and objective machine a simple question about a person standing 3 feet in front of you. Lyra's eyes narrowed. It was not what she expected. A guilty man begs. A manipulator flatters. I had done neither. I had handed her a thing she could check herself, right now, and Lyra Vance could no more refuse a verifiable test than she could stop. Breathing, because her entire life was built on trusting only what she could verify. She held my gaze, spear steady, and I saw her eyes flick as she queried her panel. Show me the anomaly's level. And I watched her face. I watched the cold, precise mind behind it hit something that did not compute. Because the system did not say level null, or level unknown, or level 1. The ghost had told me what she'd see, and I watched it land. Her system returned an error, and then, catastrophically, it lied. It filled the blank space with a fabricated answer. Dark Lord, level, Quiskamic, threat, absolute. A threat rating with no data behind it, a designation with no measurement, pure narrative wearing the costume of a stat, and Lyra Vance, who had spent her whole life reading the fine print that lazier heroes ignored, saw immediately what it was. It was not a reading. It was a label. The fair and objective system, asked a factual question, had returned a slogan. It's not measuring him, she said slowly, and for the first time the spear point dipped a fraction. It's describing him. There's no data. It's just telling me what to think about him and dressing it up as a stat. She looked at me with an entirely new expression. Not trust. Lyra Vance did not do trust, but the cold, electric focus of a brilliant mind that has just caught the objective machine in a subjective act. Everyone else's stats have data underneath, she said, more to herself than to anyone. You can drill down. Level, from EXP, from quests, from a log going back years, all verifiable, all traceable. I've checked mine 10,000 times. But his is just an assertion. The system is asserting. The system is always asserting, I said quietly. You've just never asked it about someone it can't measure, so you never caught it. Everyone else's data looks solid because the system had years to build the file. Mine's the only case where you can see it making the story up in real time, because I'm the only person it doesn't have a file on. Lyra, I'm not asking you to believe I'm a good guy. I'm asking you to notice that the thing you've trusted your whole life just lied to you. Badly. To your face. About a factual question. And then ask yourself what else it might have asserted that you never thought to check. For a long moment, the tunnel held its breath. Gideon looked between us, lost, his whole cosmos cracking. And Lyra Vance, the coldest, sharpest mind of our generation, stared at the fabricated threat rating floating in her vision, and I could see her doing the thing that made her so dangerous, following the logic all the way down without flinching from where it led. And where it led was a very dark place, because if the system would lie about this, then the rankings might be a lie. And if the rankings were a lie, then everything she had bled for, every rung she had climbed with her own will while lesser people rode their chosen titles, might be a lie. And Lyra had built her entire self on those rankings being real. I watched that cost hit her. I watched her understand that believing me meant her whole life had been spent climbing a ladder painted on a wall. And I watched her, being who she was, refuse to look away from the truth, even though it gutted her. Because she would rather hold a devastating fact than a comfortable lie. And that single quality, was why the ghost had said turning the herd was impossible, but turning the right individuals could end the world's oldest harvest. This changes nothing tactically, she said finally, and her voice was steady, but something underneath it had broken and been welded back wrong. I have questions. I don't put my questions before an unverified threat's convenience. You're still surrounded, the whole academy's still hunting you, and I still don't know what you are. She lowered the spear the rest of the way, though, and that was everything. But I don't kill things I don't understand, and right now I understand exactly one thing, which is that my system just lied to me, and I want to know why more than I want you dead. So. Her cold eyes cut to Gideon. Hero, are you going to report that the Dark Lord corrupted us both? Or are you going to stand in a tunnel that officially doesn't exist and admit that your holy quest handed you a reward called United with the Source, and won't tell you where a single retired hero in 4,000 years went. Gideon Shaw stood frozen between the two of us, the chosen of the age, the strongest weapon the system had ever forged. And I watched the war finish inside him, and I saw which side won, and it wasn't the side the system had spent 18 years building. His golden sword lowered, his shoulders came down, and in a voice hollowed out by the collapse of everything he'd believed, the hero said, "When I received the quest, it showed me your crimes. The Dark Lord's crimes. Cities burned, thousands dead, a whole future of ruin. It showed me, so clearly, and I felt the hatred, real as anything I've ever felt." He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. "But I'm standing here now, and you put down your weapon, and you asked me to think. And the monster it showed me would never have done that. So either the system showed me a future that hasn't happened, and called it a fact." His voice cracked. "Or it showed me a future it needs me to make happen. And I don't know which is worse." And that was the moment the tunnel walls themselves began to glow, red now, angry, and a chime rang out that was nothing like the gentle ding of a quest, a deep, grinding toll like a great door of judgment swinging open, and text bloomed across the vision of every hero in that tunnel, red as a wound, and even without a system, I felt the pressure of it fill the air, because the ghost read it aloud to me in a voice gone suddenly urgent. "It's overriding," the ghost said. It felt the hero doubt. "It's never lost a hero mid-harvest before, and it's not going to start now. Ethan, whatever it's about to offer them, whatever it's about to threaten, get them out of this tunnel now, because the system is done being subtle, and when the farmer notices a sheep has learned to talk, the farmer does not negotiate." What the system did next, it had never done in 4,000 years, because in 4,000 years, it had never needed to, because no Dark Lord had ever turned a hero. It broadcast, to every panel in the Empire, a new decree, and the ghost read it to me as the red light pulsed. Emergency override. The hero, Gideon Shaw, and the ranked second Lyra Vance have been corrupted by the Dark Lord's influence. Their titles are suspended. Their crimes, treason against the world. New objective, all heroes, slay the corrupted and the Dark Lord together. Reward, tripled. Any hero who hesitates will be flagged as corrupted in turn. I watched it hit them. I watched Gideon gasp as his golden chosen aura, the light that had surrounded him since birth, simply switched off, leaving him gray and diminished for the first time in his life. I watched Lyra's rank, the number 2 she had bled a decade to earn, vanish from above her head and become a red brand. Corrupted. And I watched the 2 other elite students who had followed her into the tunnel, students who a minute ago had been her loyal juniors, take one look at that red brand and raise their weapons against her, because the system had just told them that hesitation would make them corrupted too, and fear is the fastest teacher there is. "Captain Vance," one of them said, and his voice shook and his blade shook. I'm sorry, the system says," and he didn't finish, he just attacked. And Lyra, who a minute ago had been their commander, had to parry a killing blow from a boy she'd trained, and the look on her face as she did it, the pure, cold fury of a person watching a machine turn her own people into her executioners with a single line of red text, told me she had crossed a bridge she was never coming back over. "You see it now," I shouted at her over the ring of steel. "That's what it does to anyone who thinks. It doesn't argue. It just tells everyone you're the monster and lets the fear do the rest. That's what it did to me for 4 years. That's what it's doing to you in 4 seconds." Lyra disarmed the first boy with a brutal economy of motion, refusing to kill him, and snarled, "I understand the diagnosis. Save the lecture and get us out, anomaly. You're the one with the invisible doors." And that was the moment I stopped being prey and started being something else. Because for the first time in my life, people needed me to lead. And the ghost was in my head, giving me the map of every unmapped passage in the academy, every blind spot the system couldn't see, every door edited out of everyone's vision but mine, and I ran. And this time I wasn't running away, I was running with people behind me, trusting me to get them out. And it turns out that changes a man faster than any level ever could. I took them through the dark. Down passages that didn't exist, through a wine cellar the system had forgotten, along a dry aqueduct beneath the training fields. And above us we could hear the whole academy mobilizing. 2,000 heroes now hunting not 1 target, but 3. And every panel in the Empire screaming that the hero and the rank second had fallen to darkness. Gideon ran like a man in a nightmare, gray and stumbling, muttering, "They think I'm corrupted. They all think I'm corrupted." And I understood that for the chosen, beloved his whole life, Being suddenly hated by everyone was a specific agony I had a 4-year head start on. "Welcome to being the Null," I told him, not unkindly, hauling him around a corner. "It's survivable. I'm proof." We came out through a grate into the ravine below the academy, the 3 of us plus the 2 junior heroes Lyra had knocked out and, to my surprise, insisted on dragging along because, she said flatly, they're not traitors, they're scared, and if we leave them, the system eats the evidence of what it did to them. And I realized that Lyra Vance, for all her ice, had a code, and the code was that she did not abandon her people to the machine. And I filed that away as the second most important thing I'd learned that day. The ghost guided us to a place I'd never known existed, though I'd lived my whole life a few miles from it. Beyond the ravine, past the edge of the system's careful mapping, in a stretch of wild country that every panel in the Empire rendered as empty wasteland not worth visiting, there were ruins. Old ruins. Older than the Empire, older than the Academy, older, the ghost said quietly as we climbed toward them in the failing light, than the current system itself. "This was a city once," the ghost said, "in my era. The City of the Free, we called it, the last place people lived outside the game, before the harvest of my age wiped it off every map and every memory. The system can't see it, won't render it, has spent 4,000 years convincing everyone it's empty rock. It's the one place on Earth where a person can stand outside the lie. I've been alone here for 4 millennia, boy, waiting. It's not much of a rebel base, but it's the only ground in the world the farmer doesn't own." As we descended toward the dead city in the last of the light, the ghost told me its history, and I listened, because I was learning that the ghost only volunteered the old stories when it needed me to understand something it couldn't say straight. "It wasn't always like this," the ghost said. "There was a time before the system, though almost nothing remembers it, because remembering is one of the things it edits. People were just people. They grew and built and loved and died, unmeasured, ungraded, free and frightened, and their own. And then the system came, and no one knows from where, whether it was made by human hands that lost control of it, or whether it drifted in from somewhere between the stars. But it came, and it offered people the one thing free, frightened mortal people have always most secretly wanted, which is to be told that they matter, provably, in numbers, forever. And people took it. Of course they took it. That's the part the angry rebels never forgive, and the part I've made my peace with. Nobody was conquered, Ethan. Nobody was enslaved at sword point. People handed over their freedom with both hands and wept with gratitude, because freedom is heavy and terrifying and lonely, and the system offered to carry it for them. And all it asked in return was a small cut of their will, so small at first that no one noticed. And by the time the cut was everything, no one remembered there had ever been an alternative. I looked down at the vast, broken city below us, and I asked the question the story was built to make me ask. "And this place?" "This," said the ghost, "was where the ones who noticed came. In the early centuries, before the editing got total, there were always a few who felt the cut, who woke in the night with the sense that something was skimming them, who couldn't quite believe the beautiful story. And they found each other, and they came here, to the edge of the maps, and they built the City of the Free, a place to live as people instead of players. And for a while, it was the most alive place in the world, because a thing that has chosen itself is more alive than a thing that's been handed a script, always, every time. My friend and I were born here, in the last generation of it, 2 anomalies in the last free city, in the last days before the harvest of our era came to erase it. We grew up unmeasured, Ethan. Do you understand what a gift that was, and what a weapon it made us? Everyone else in the world was born into the game and could not imagine outside it. We were born outside it, and could see the whole shape of the thing from the one vantage point it couldn't reach. That's what an anomaly is, at the root. Not a person with a power, a person with a view." We passed the first broken wall, and I trailed my hand along the ancient pale stone. And I swear I could feel the ghost aching beside me. 4,000 years of homesickness for a place that no living person but it remembered. "When the harvest came for our era," the ghost said, quieter now, "it came here first. It couldn't abide the City of the Free. A whole population living outside the leash, it was an insult to the whole design, a proof that the story was optional. So it declared the 2 of us, the 2 anomalies, the dark lords of the age, and it sent its hero and its herd. And they came over this ridge exactly as we're crossing it now, thousands of them, and they burned the City of the Free to the ground and slaughtered everyone in it who wouldn't accept a leash. And then it edited the whole thing out of the memory of the world, so that within a generation, No one knew there had ever been a place where people lived free, and the ruins became empty wasteland on every map. And the greatest civilization the human heart ever built became a thing that officially never existed. That's why I brought you here, boy. Not just because it's hidden, because you need to stand in the one place that proves the story can be refused. And you need to know that people have refused it before and built something beautiful, and that the beauty was real, even though it burned. Because if you don't know that, if you think the leash is all there's ever been, then the system has already won the only war that matters, the war for what you can imagine. We reached the top of the ridge, and the whole dead city opened below us in the dusk, mile upon mile of pale, silent stone. And I understood that I was looking at a graveyard, and a promise at the same time. The tomb of the last free people, and the proof that free people had existed. And I felt something settle into me that would never leave. A debt, a direction, a refusal of my own. We came over the ridge, and below us in the dusk lay a vast, silent city of pale stone, beautiful and broken and utterly erased from the knowledge of the world. And Gideon Shaw stopped and stared at proof, physical, unpleasant proof, that the system had hidden an entire civilization from the eyes of everyone alive. And I watched the last of his old faith die, and I watched something harder and truer start to grow in its place. Lyra took it in with her cold, assessing eyes and said only, "How much of the world is edited out that we never thought to look for?" Which was, I was learning, exactly the right question. And as the five of us descended into the city that didn't exist, the ghost said, in my head, softly, so only I could hear, "This is how it begins, every time. A dark lord and a handful of the awakened, hiding in the ruins, thinking they can win. I've watched it begin before, Ethan, twice, and both times it ended with the ruins burning and the free souls dead and the harvest rolling on. Let me tell you about them, the two after mine, because you're standing exactly where they stood, and you should know how they fell. The first was maybe 1,000 years after my era. Another anomaly, a woman, fierce and bright, and she gathered the awakened just as we're gathering now, and she did something I never managed. She got the truth out, spread it, an underground of freed minds passing the secret hand to hand across the empire. And for a few years it grew, and I dared to hope, in my walls, that this one would be different. But she made the mistake the angry ones always make, the mistake I made. She decided that since the truth was on her side, she was owed the win. And she moved too fast and too proud, and when the harvest came for her, she met it with fury instead of care. And she raised an army of the freed and marched on the capital, and the system did the thing it does. It turned her own freed followers' fear against her, whispered to each of them that the others were about to break and run, and an army held together by nothing but a shared terror of the machine came apart at the first real pressure. And she died at the head of a rout, cursing them for cowards, never understanding that you cannot build a free thing out of people you're commanding. That the moment she gave orders, she'd become just a smaller system. The second was maybe 1,500 years ago, and he was the opposite, a gentle one, more like Alaric than like me, and he learned from her failure and swung too far the other way. He refused to fight at all. He just freed people quietly, one at a time, and hid, and built a little community of the awakened in secret, and told himself that if he was patient enough and gentle enough, he could free the whole world without ever confronting the thing that owned it. And you know what the system did to him? Nothing. For a long time, nothing at all. It let him grow his little garden of freed souls, let him feel safe, let him believe gentleness was winning. Because it knew something he didn't. It knew that a hidden garden is just a pantry it hasn't harvested yet. And when his community had grown large enough to be worth taking, it simply sent the hero. And it framed the whole gentle community as a Dark Lord's cult, and it burned them, every one. And the gentle anomaly died last, watching his patience get everyone he'd freed killed, understanding too late that you cannot outweight a thing that has all the time in the world and owns the ground you're standing on. Do you see it, Ethan? Do you see the trap in both of them? The fierce one thought the answer was force and became a tyrant. The gentle one thought the answer was patience and became a pantry. And I, the first one, thought the answer was to tear the whole thing down and became a catastrophe. 3 anomalies, 3 answers, force and patience and destruction, and every one of them was still an answer the system could survive, because every one of them was still a plan to save people, still one special free soul deciding what was best for everyone else. And the system has 4,000 years of practice defeating people who want to save the world, because wanting to save the world is just wanting to run it with better intentions. And better intentions are the easiest thing in creation to corrupt. So before you let yourself hope, you need to know the thing I've never told a living soul. The reason both rebellions failed. The reason I'm so afraid for you. The system has a face. It has an agent inside the world, a person, or something wearing a person, who walks among the heroes and steers the harvest by hand when the automatic systems aren't enough. Every era, there's a puppeteer. And Ethan, the reason I'm telling you now, in this moment, is that I've finally figured out who it is in your era, and you're not going to want to believe me because you already know them, and they've been standing close to you your whole life. Say it, I told the ghost, standing at the edge of the dead city while the others made a fire from ancient timber below. Who is it? And the ghost said the name that put a crack straight through the middle of me. Master Alaric. I stopped breathing. Alaric. Old Alaric, the caretaker, the man who ran the academy's servant staff, the one adult in my entire life who had ever been kind to me. It was Alaric who found me starving in my first year and made sure I ate. Alaric who got me the mandatory inclusion place at Arcadia when the proctors wanted to ship the embarrassing Null off to a research facility. Alaric who used to sit with me in the servants' hall late at night when the cruelty of the day had been too much and tell me, in his gentle rasp, that worth wasn't a number, that I mattered, that my day would come. He was the only person who had ever told me I mattered. And the ghost was telling me he was the hand of the machine that had spent my whole life trying to break me for the slaughter. No, I said, not him. He hated the system. He used to say the rankings were foolish. He was the only one who kept you close, the ghost said, gently, and the gentleness was worse than cruelty. Who made sure you stayed at the academy where he could watch you. Who fed you just enough to keep you alive, and comforted you just enough to keep you docile, and told you that you mattered in a voice so kind, you never once thought to ask why the humble caretaker of a combat academy had the authority to override the proctors and place a null nobody wanted. Ethan, think about it with the eyes you have now. An anomaly is the most dangerous thing in the world to the system, and the most unpredictable, because it can't be leashed or monitored the normal way. So what does a careful farmer do with the one animal it can't fence? It doesn't lock it in a cell, that would make it fight. It befriends it. It gives it a kind old man to trust, a single warm hand in a cold world, so that the dangerous free thing stays soft, stays sad, stays convinced it's worthless and small, stays exactly where the farmer can reach it on the day of the harvest. The cruelty of the other students kept you down, but it was Alaric's kindness that kept you tame. The others made you hate the world. He made sure you only ever hated yourself. I sat down hard on the cold stone, because it fit. God help me, it fit every piece. The convenient timing of his kindness, the way he always appeared on my worst days, just when I might have gotten angry enough to do something. The gentle, endless, patient work of convincing me that the answer to being treated as nothing was to accept, to endure, to wait for a day that would never come. He hadn't been comforting me, he'd been managing me. 16 years of the tenderest possible sabotage, and the proof was that it had worked. I had walked into that courtyard as the most powerful being in the world, believing I was the least. And that belief, that beautiful, gentle lie planted by the only person I trusted, had very nearly gotten me killed without lifting a finger. Both times before, the ghost said quietly, the rebellion failed because the puppeteer was inside it. A friend, a mentor, someone the Dark Lord trusted so completely that they never checked. And at the crucial moment, the trusted one turned the key and the ruins burned. I'm telling you now, tonight, before you've let him close again, because the one advantage we have that we've never had before is this. This time, the Dark Lord knows the friend is the knife before the friend does the cutting. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, grieving a kindness that had never been real, the way I'd once grieved a worth I'd never had. And then I did the thing that I think, looking back, was the real beginning of my war, because it was the first time I chose to become something instead of just surviving. I got up. I went down to the fire, where Lyra sat cold and alert, and Gideon sat gray and lost, and the two young heroes lay bound and unconscious. And I knelt beside the nearest of the bound boys, and I said to the ghost, "Teach me. You said I have power. You said I'm a threat to it, not to the world. So teach me what I actually am, right now, because I'm done being the tame one." And the ghost, for the first time in 4,000 years, taught a living anomaly how to use the thing inside him, and it was nothing like a skill. You have no system, the ghost said, because you are the one thing a system cannot write. And what a thing that cannot be written can do, Ethan, is unwrite. Every leash the system puts on a person is a kind of text, a script wrapped around a free soul telling it what to perceive and believe and want. You can't cast fireballs, you can't level up, but you can reach into that text with nothing but your will and your bare hand, and you can tear it. You can free people, one at a time, by touch, by choosing to. It is slow and it is exhausting and it will hurt you every time, because unwriting a lie costs something the way telling one never does. But it is the one power in all the world the system has no defense against, because it never imagined the cattle could be unmade into people. Put your hand on the boy, not to hurt him, to free him, and will the leash to break. I put my hand on the bound young hero's forehead. He was maybe 17. Tear tracks dried on his face. A boy who'd attacked his own captain because a red word told him to. And I closed my eyes, and I reached, not with a skill I didn't have, but with the raw refusal at the center of me. The same refusal that had kept the system's hooks from ever finding purchase. And I felt it. The leash. A tight, bright script wound around his mind, humming with the system's authority. And I took hold of it with my will, and it burned my hand like a live wire, and I tore. The boy convulsed. His panel, I couldn't see it, but Lyra could, and she surged to her feet with her spear half raised, said, "His interface just shattered. What did you—" And then the boy's eyes flew open, and they were clear. Clear in a way I had never seen a system-blessed person's eyes be clear. No faint blue reflection, no panel glaze, just a frightened 17-year-old looking at the real world for the first time in his life. And he gasped, and he grabbed my wrist, and he said in a voice full of a horror and a wonder I would spend the rest of my life learning to answer for, "It's gone." The game, the numbers, it's all gone. And I can see. Oh gods, I can see. It was on top of everything the whole time. It was on top of everything, and I never knew. And then he started to cry. The deep, broken crying of a person waking up. And across the fire, I met Lyra Vance's cold eyes. And for the first time, I saw something crack all the way through the ice, because she had just watched me do, in 10 seconds with my bare hand, the one thing the most powerful system in 4,000 years had declared impossible. I had taken a leash off a human soul, and the ghost whispered, exhausted, proud, terrified, "Now you know what you are, Ethan Reed. Now you know why they call you the Dark Lord. You're not the end of the world, you're the end of the leash." And that, to the thing that owns everyone, is so much worse. I sat back against the ancient stone with the freed boy weeping against my shoulder, and I looked at my own trembling hand, the hand that had just done the impossible. And I thought about all the times that same hand had held a mop, carried a rack of practice swords, taken a shove from a boy farming me for points. And I understood that it had been this hand the whole time, that the worthless Null everyone had laughed at had been carrying, in his own two ordinary hands, the one power in all the world the god of 4,000 years could not defend against, and had been taught so thoroughly to hate himself that he'd never once thought to wonder what those hands might actually be for. They were for opening doors. They always had been. I just hadn't known there were any. Freeing the first boy nearly put me on the ground. The ghost hadn't lied about the cost. Tearing that leash took something out of me that no amount of rest fully gave back, a kind of tiredness that lived in the will rather than the body. And I understood immediately that whatever else I was not going to walk into the academy and free 2,000 people with a laying on of hands. It didn't scale. Each one was a war. I freed the second boy an hour later, and it hurt worse. And when it was done, I sat with my back against ancient stone and shook. And Lyra Vance crouched in front of me and studied me the way she studied everything, coldly, completely, and said, "So that's the great dark power. You can save people one at a time, at a cost that's clearly going to kill you before you clear a single village, against an enemy that owns billions." She said it without cruelty, as a strategist naming a problem. The system turns people into an army with a line of text. You turn them back one exhausting soul at a time. Numerically, Ethan, you lose. You understand that. Whatever we do, it can't be this. This is beautiful, and it's useless at scale. "I know," I said. "Then what's the plan?" she said. "Because I've thrown away my rank, my people are hunting me, and I did not do that to sit in a dead city watching you faint on strangers. If we can't free the world one mind at a time, how do we free it?" And the ghost answered, through me, the thing it had been building toward for 4,000 years. "You don't free the minds," the ghost said. "You free the source. Every leash in the world runs back to one place, the thing the system calls the source, the core where the harvest is stored and the whole game is run from. It's not a metaphor, it's a real place, hidden at the center of everything, and it is the single point of failure for the entire system. Because the system is powerful the way a spider's web is powerful, vast and strong and inescapable, right up until you burn the one anchor that holds it all. Ethan can't unwrite 2,000 people. But if he can reach the source and put his hands on it, an anomaly, the one authority the system can't overwrite, touching the root of every leash at once, he doesn't free them one at a time, he frees all of them, everywhere, in a single instant. Every panel in the world goes dark forever, and every human being alive wakes up at the same moment and remembers they were ever free. Silence around the fire. Gideon spoke first, gray and quiet. And what happens to us, the ones with systems? If you tear out the root, if every panel dies, I lose everything. My skills, my strength, the chosen title, all of it runs on the system. I'd be nothing. Just a person. And there it was, the dilemma the ghost had warned me about, the reason both prior rebellions had a fault line running through their own ranks. Because freedom and power were the same wire, and you could not cut the leash without cutting the strength it carried. I looked at the hero, the most powerful being of the age, asking me if my victory meant his erasure. And I told him the truth, because I was done with kind lies. Yes, I said, if we win, you lose everything the system ever gave you. Your skills, your rank, your whole identity as the hero. You'd wake up as an ordinary person in an ordinary world, weak and free, the same as everyone. I'm not going to pretend that's a small thing. For you, it might be the biggest loss of anyone alive. So I'm not going to make you. I can free you tonight, take your leash off by hand, and you'll be clear and powerless and hunted. Or you can keep your system and your power and use it, right up until the moment we win and it dies with everyone else's. But I won't lie to you about the ending, Gideon. However we do this, the hero doesn't survive it. Only the person does. You have to decide if that's a death or a birth. Gideon Shaw sat with that for a long time, the fire painting his gray, diminished face. And I watched a boy who had been the center of the universe since birth confront the possibility of becoming no one. And I did not envy him the choice. Lyra, characteristically, had already made hers. Keep my system, she said flatly. All of you who can bear to, keep them. Don't free me, Ethan, not yet. A freed mind is clear, but it's also weak, and it lights up as a shattered interface the second the system looks. You saw it. The boy's panel didn't just go dark, it broke, loudly. If we're going to reach a source at the center of everything guarded by every hero in the world, we need people who can still fight in the system's own language. Spies who still read as loyal. Weapons it doesn't know are pointed at it. I'll carry my leash like a knife between my teeth, and I'll cut it myself at the very end. Freedom's the reward, not the tactic. Use me while I still register as one of them. And I understood again why the ghost had said the whole thing turned on individuals and not the herd. Because Lyra Vance had just volunteered to keep a lie wrapped around her own mind, knowing exactly what it was in order to weaponize it against its maker. And that took a kind of cold courage I don't think I'll ever fully possess. That first night in the Dead City was the longest of my life, and in some ways the most important, because it was the night a hunted Null with a voice in his head became something that could be called, however small, a rebellion. We built the fire in the shell of a great hall, under a broken dome open to the stars, and the two freed boys sat close to it, shivering, not from cold. Their names were Finn and Silas, and they were 16 and 17, and they had been ordinary, low-ranked students an hour before I tore the leashes off their minds, and now they were the only two people in the world besides me who could see the sky without a panel over it, and they did not know what to do with themselves. Finn kept looking at his own hands. There used to be numbers, he said, over and over, quietly. When I picked something up, there'd be a little tag, telling me what it was worth, what I could do with it. It's just a rock now. It's just a rock, and I have to decide what it's worth myself, and I don't know how. And I understood that this was the wound at the center of everything, that 4,000 years of the system deciding for people had left even a 16-year-old unable to look at a rock without being told its value, and that the work ahead was not going to be a war of swords. It was going to be the slow, terrible work of teaching a whole species how to hold a rock again. Lyra did not sit by the fire. She prowled the edges of the light, spear in hand, and she interrogated me, and the ghost through me, with the relentless precision of a mind that trusted nothing it hadn't verified. The cost, she said. When you freeze someone, quantify it. How many can you do before it kills you? I don't know, I admitted. 2 nearly put me on the ground. The hero's leash almost killed us both. So not an army, she said. Confirmed earlier. Next, the freed ones. They can't be releashed, correct? Once you've torn it out, the system can't just rewrite them? The ghost answered through me. Correct, and unwriting is permanent. The interface shatters, and the mind is clear forever. But it also means they light up as anomalies the moment the system looks closely. 2 freed minds in the wild country is what's about to bring the puppeteer down on us, you understand. Every person Ethan frees is a beacon. Lyra absorbed that, cold and fast. Then freeing people is a weapon we can only use when we're ready to be found. Noted. It's not a stealth tool, it's a flare. She crouched across the fire from me, her eyes reflecting the flames. Here's what I don't understand, Anomaly. You had this power your whole life, sleeping in you. The ghost had 18 years to reach you. Why now? Why did the quest fire today, at the trial, in front of the whole world, instead of quietly, years ago, when you could have been dealt with in a back alley? And the ghost's answer, when it came through me, chilled the whole group into silence. Because the system wanted a spectacle, it said. Think about it. It could have had Ethan killed quietly any day for 4 years. Instead, it waited for the Ascension trial, the one day the entire Empire is watching through its own network, and it revealed the Dark Lord in front of everyone, at the peak of the hero's glory. Why? Because the harvest isn't just the killing. The harvest is the story. Every few thousand years, the system needs to renew the myth, needs 1 billion people to watch the noble hero strike down the great evil. Because that story is the leash. That story is what makes people love the game. It wasn't going to waste Ethan on a back alley. It was going to spend him on the biggest stage in the world, a public execution broadcast to every mind alive. The Dark Lord slain, the hero ascendant, the story renewed for another age. You weren't just going to die, boy. You were going to be the season finale. I sat with that, and it was somehow worse than everything else. The idea that my death had been scheduled as entertainment, content, a narrative beat in a show 4,000 years long. And then Gideon, who had been silent and gray this whole time, staring into the fire, spoke for the first time since we'd reached the ruins, and his voice was hollow. I was the star of it, he said. The hero. I've been training my whole life to deliver the finale, and I never knew there was a finale. I thought it was my life. I thought I was becoming something, and I was the closing act of a show designed to make everyone love their chains. Everything I am was written to make my worst crime look like everyone's happiest ending. He looked up at me, and the firelight caught the tears on his face. How do I live with that, Ethan? How does anyone live with finding out their whole life was the villain's masterpiece, and they were the smiling face on the front of it? And I didn't have an answer, not that night, but the ghost did, and it said the thing through me that I think saved Gideon Shaw's soul, the thing I've repeated to 100 freed people since. You live with it, the ghost said, by understanding that you were lied to, and that a person acting in good faith on a lie is not the lie's author, they're its victim. The system didn't make you evil, Gideon. It made you good, and then it aimed your goodness. That's what it does to everyone. That's the whole engine. It takes the best in people, the striving, the loyalty, the love, the courage, and it points all of it at keeping the cage locked. You were never the villain. You were the finest thing it ever stole. And the fact that you're sitting by this fire grieving instead of hunting means it doesn't have you anymore. Means the goodness it aimed has finally, for the first time, turned around to look at the hand that was aiming it. That's not damnation, boy. That's the first free thing you've ever done. Gideon cried then, openly, the deep, cleansing crying of a person setting down a weight they didn't know they'd been carrying their whole life. And Finn, the 16-year-old, crawled over and sat beside the fallen hero and put a small hand on his shoulder, one newly free soul comforting another. And I looked around that fire, at the striver and the hero and the 2 frightened boys, and I felt, for the first time in my life, that I was somewhere I belonged. And I understood that this ragged handful of the awakened around a fire in a city that didn't exist, was the most dangerous thing in the world to the machine that owned everyone. Not because we were strong, we weren't, but because we were choosing, together, in the dark. And choosing together is the one thing a farm can never allow its cattle to do. Meanwhile, in the highest tower of Arcadia Academy, in an office nobody ever thought to wonder how a humble caretaker had access to, Master Alaric stood at a window, looking out toward the wild country where the maps showed nothing, and he was not gentle now, and he was not old. Or rather, he was old in the way a mountain is old, and he watched the far dark hills with eyes that held 4,000 years of harvests. And he was, for the first time in a very long time, concerned. A junior report had flagged an anomaly he'd have preferred not to see. 2 heroes, corrupted, that was routine, the override handled that. But a 3rd and 4th interface had gone offline in the wild country, and they hadn't gone dark the way a dead hero's does. They'd shattered. From the inside. Which meant the boy had learned to unwrite, years earlier than any prior anomaly, which meant the ghost was real and awake and had finally found an ear, which meant this harvest was going to be one of the difficult ones. Alaric sighed, a sound like wind through a graveyard, and he murmured, to the empty room, to the thing he served, to himself, 16 years I kept you soft, little Null. I brought you soup. I told you that you mattered. I did the kindest work I know how to do, and I meant every word. That's the part none of them ever understand. I always mean it. He turned from the window, and where his shadow fell, the light seemed to bend wrong. But you were always going to be the hard one. I felt it the day I found you. So we'll do it the old way. And Master Alaric, the puppeteer of the age, the gentle hand that had kept a Dark Lord tame for 16 years, picked up a blade that had not been drawn in 400 years, and began, unhurriedly, to walk down the long stair toward the wild country, humming, softly, an old and kindly tune. The hunters came before Alaric did. 2 freed minds burning in the wild country were aflare, the ghost had warned, and the flare was seen. A little after midnight, Lyra, who never slept, went still at the edge of the firelight and said one word. Movement. And then we heard it, the sound of skill-boosted boots on ancient stone, and out of the dark at the far end of the great hall came a hunting party, a dozen elite students who had tracked us to the edge of the maps, and at their head, glowing with a warrior's skill and a hate 4 years deep, was Rorik Croft. The system led us right to you, Rorik called out, and his panel light lit his ugly grin. 2 shattered interfaces out in the nothing, blazing like a signal fire. It can't see you, Null, but it can see the holes where you've been. Clever. Doesn't matter. Reward's still unprecedented, and I've waited a long, long time for this. And he came, and the dozen came with him, and the fight that followed taught me everything about what we were and weren't. Lyra was a storm. This was the thing the rankings had actually measured, underneath the system's lies, a genuine, terrifying will to win, and she met the charge alone at the front, her black spear a blur, and she fought not like a hero reading a panel, but like a person who had drilled every motion into her own flesh 10,000 times. And I understood watching her why she'd always been number 2 by the system's grace, and number 1 by any honest measure. But there were 12 of them, and they fought with the flawless shared coordination of linked systems, chaining skills across each other, covering each other's gaps, a single organism with 12 bodies, and against that, even Lyra could only hold, not win. Gideon couldn't fight at all. Freed, powerless, the once hero could only shield the 2 boys with his body, and the shame on his face as he did it. The strongest man alive reduced to a wall of meat was its own kind of wound. And me? I was still a floor cleaner. I had no skills. But I had the one thing, and in the middle of that chaos, I finally understood how to use it as a weapon and not just a mercy. I couldn't fight 12 linked heroes, but I could break the link. I threw myself not at Rorik, but at the youngest hunter, a terrified girl at the edge of the formation, who was only there because the system told her hesitation was corruption. And I got a hand on her, and I tore her leash out in the middle of the battle, and she screamed, and her interface shattered, and crucially, the shared battlenet she'd been part of convulsed, because you cannot run a coordinated skill chain through a node that has suddenly become invisible to the system. And for 1 second, the flawless 12-body organism stuttered as the hole where she'd been threw off every lock that ran through her. Lyra, who missed nothing, saw it instantly. "That's it," she shouted. "That's the tactic, Ethan. You don't free them to save them, you free them to blind the formation. Everyone you tear out is a hole in their net." And she drove into the stutter and put 3 of them down before the system could reroute. It cost me. Each tearing in the middle of a battle nearly dropped me, and Gideon had to haul me back by the collar twice, and it was ugly and desperate, and we were losing anyway. 12 was too many. Until the freed girl, the one I'd torn loose mid-fight, did the thing that changed the shape of the whole war. She turned around. Clear-eyed for the first time in her life, seeing the hunt she'd been part of from the outside, she looked at her former teammates chaining lethal skills at frightened children, and she looked at the red word the system had branded us with, and she made, in the middle of a battlefield, a choice, and she stepped to our side, and she said in a shaking voice, "I can still fight. The leash is gone, but I remember the moves. They're mine. I trained them. They're in my hands, not the panel." And she picked up a fallen blade and stood with us, a freed soul fighting of her own free will, clumsier than the linked heroes, but hers, entirely hers. And there was something about the sight of it that reached even the hunters, that made two of them falter and lower their weapons and stare. Rorik did not falter. Rorik had never in his life been anything but the arithmetic of his own advantage, and when he saw the fight turning, he did the thing his kind always does. He went for the weakest target, to farm the easy kill. He broke past Lyra and lunged at Finn, the 16-year-old, blade raised, and I was too far and too spent to reach them, and I watched death fall toward a child. And Gideon Shaw, powerless, skillless, ordinary, threw his unarmed body between the blade and the boy. It should have killed him. It caught him across the chest, deep, and he went down, and Finn screamed, and for one horrible instant, I thought the once hero had spent his ordinary human life to save a boy he'd known for a day. But Rorik, overextended, was open, and Lyra does not miss, and her spear took him through the shoulder and pinned him screaming to the ancient stone, and the fight went out of them. Rest of them all at once, some fleeing into the dark, some dropping their weapons. Two of them, the ones who'd faltered, simply sitting down and weeping, because they had followed the system into a dead city to murder children, and the fog had finally, too late, cleared. Gideon lived. Barely, that night. The wound was bad, and we had no healer and no skills to close it, and I sat with him while Lyra bound it with strips of our own clothes, and he gripped my hand and gasped, "Worth it, worth it. I finally got to protect someone because I chose to, and not because a quest told me to. Do you understand? It's the first thing I ever did that was mine." And I told him to shut up and save his strength, and he laughed, wetly. And I understood that the once hero had found, in a powerless body bleeding on ancient stone, the thing 4,000 heroes before him had died never knowing. That the value was never in the strength, it was always, only, in the choosing. We survived the night. Rorik, pinned and bleeding and stripped of his easy arithmetic, screamed threats until he passed out, and the freed girl, whose name was Sky, sat by our fire clutching a borrowed blade, one more of the awakened, and I did not have the strength to free anyone else, and we all knew that the hunters had only been the herald, that a flare had been lit, and something far worse had seen it. He came at dawn, alone, walking up the main avenue of the dead city as though he'd strolled it 1,000 times, which, I would learn, he had. The freed boys felt him first, some new, raw instinct their unleashing had given them, and then Lyra's spear was up and Gideon was on his feet, and I climbed to the top of a broken wall and looked down, and there he was. Master Alaric. In the gray tunic he always wore, with the gentle stoop I'd known my whole life, except that the stoop was gone now, and he stood straight, and he was taller than I remembered, and the morning light did that wrong thing around him, bending like it was reluctant to touch him. "Ethan," he called up warmly, and the warmth was the same warmth that had comforted me for 16 years, and that was the horror of it. It was completely real. "You've had a very hard day, haven't you? Come down, let's talk. I brought—" He lifted a hand, and there was a small, wrapped bundle in it. "I brought soup. You always forget to eat when you're upset." And I nearly wept, standing on that wall, because part of me, the small, starved boy who'd had exactly one kind hand in a cold world, wanted so badly to climb down and take the soup and be told everything would be all right. The ghost said very softly, "That is the weapon, Ethan. That, right there. Not the sword on his hip. The soup. It broke me too at the end. Be careful." Lyra moved first, because Lyra always moved first, and it was a mistake, and it was the mistake that showed us all exactly what we were facing. She came off the flank with her black spear and a killing thrust aimed at the old man's heart. 10 years of drilled and deadly will behind it, the strike that had ended 100 duels. And Alaric did not draw his sword, did not even fully turn. He simply lifted one hand, palm out, without looking, and Lyra Vance stopped in midair. Not blocked, stopped. Frozen mid-lunge, spear a handspan from his chest, held in place by nothing at all. And I watched the most dangerous student Arcadia ever produced strain with everything she had against an invisible grip that did not so much as tremble. And Alaric, still not looking at her, said mildly, "Not yet, child. The grown-ups are talking," and set her down, gently, on her feet, and stepped back and let her go. She staggered back to us, white-faced, and she said, low and shaken, the words that told me how bad it was, because Lyra Vance did not frighten. I couldn't move. I have never in my life not been able to move. And Alaric looked up at the broken tower behind us, an ancient spire of the dead city that had stood 4,000 years, and he sighed, a little sadly, and he made a small gesture, almost an apology, and the tower came apart. Not exploded, not toppled, it unmade, stone by stone dissolving into blue light, and then into nothing. A structure that had outlasted an entire civilization, simply ceasing to have ever been, in perfect silence, in 3 seconds. And the 2 freed boys cried out, and Sky grabbed them, and even Gideon flinched, and Alaric lowered his hand and said, gently, I could do that to the 6 of you as easily as I did it to the tower, and it would grieve me, and it would not slow me for a heartbeat. I have 4,000 years of the whole world's harvested authority behind this hand, Ethan. Your ghost is a whisper. Your spy is a child I can hold in the air. Your hero has thrown away the only power that made him worth fearing. I do not say this to threaten you. I say it so that you understand there is no fight here. There was never going to be a fight. There is only a conversation, and then there is whatever I decide, and I have already decided everything except whether it hurts. So come down, and let us make it not hurt. And the ghost, in my head, was silent for a long moment, and then it said, very quietly, the truest tactical assessment it ever gave me. He's not lying, Ethan. You cannot beat him, not with steel, not with numbers, not with your unwriting. He's too vast and too fast, and he'll unmake your hand before it touches him. Every rebellion that tried to fight the puppeteer died fighting the puppeteer. So don't fight him. That's the whole of it. That's 4,000 years of failure in one sentence. He is the strongest being in the world, and he has exactly one weakness, and it is the same weakness that made him the strongest being in the world. He was kind once. He is kind, still, underneath 4,000 years of penance. That's why he brought soup. That's why he's giving you a conversation instead of just unmaking you. The reckless me tried to kill him and died. You have to do the thing I was never soft enough to imagine. You have to reach the kindness the system weaponized, and remind it that it was ever anything but a weapon. So I stayed on the wall, and I said, you're the puppeteer. And Alaric's kind face did not flinch, did not deny, only grew sad, an old man disappointed by a truth he'd hoped to spare me. I am the one who keeps the world running, he said. The puppeteer is what the ghost in your head calls me, and I understand why. But it's not quite fair. I don't pull strings for pleasure, boy. I keep the machine fed, and the people calm, and the harvests as gentle as harvests can be. And do you know why I'm good at it? Do you know why, of all the beings the system could use as its hand, it chose me? He looked up at me, and for the first time the warmth thinned, and something ancient showed through. Because 4,000 years ago, I was you. I was the anomaly, the null, the unleashed one. I stood where you're standing, in this very city, with a ghost in my ear and a handful of freed souls behind me, and I believed, exactly as you believe right now, that I could tear out the root and free the world. I went cold. Below me, the ghost had gone utterly, terribly still. There were 2 of us, Alaric said, in the last era, 2 anomalies, born the same year, my friend and me. And when the harvest came for us, we ran here, and we made our stand, and my friend, oh, my friend was magnificent, brave and burning and certain. My friend was the Dark Lord they still whisper about, and I loved them, and we swore we'd free the world together or die. His eyes lifted, and I swear they went straight to the air beside me, straight to the ghost, as if he could see it, as if he'd always known it was there. And we reached the source. We actually reached it. No rebellion before or since has gotten so close. And at the root of the world, the system offered us the only 2 choices it has ever offered an anomaly who gets. That far. Die. Or serve. It cannot override us, you see. That's the whole point of us. So it cannot force us. It can only kill us, or convince us. And my friend chose to die. My friend put their hands on the source to tear it out, and the system could not stop them. So it did the only thing it could. It let them try, and it showed them, in that final instant, the truth that it shows every anomaly who reaches the root. It showed us what happens if we win. Alaric's voice dropped, and the whole dead city seemed to lean in to hear it. If you tear out the root, Ethan, every leash breaks at once, yes. Every panel dies. Every person wakes up free, all at the same instant. Billions of people, who have never made a single choice for themselves, who don't know how to grow food without a quest telling them to, don't know how to govern without a ranking, don't know how to be a person without a number, Because for 4,000 years, the system has done all of it for them. Every decision, every structure, every rung. You don't free them into a garden, boy. You free them into a burning building with the lights off. My friend saw it in that last instant, saw the world I would have to watch happen. The famine and the slaughter and the madness of billions of newborn adults with no idea how to hold their own lives. And my friend tore the root out anyway, because my friend believed freedom was worth any price, even a price paid by everyone else. He looked, again, at the space beside me, and his ancient eyes were wet. And it was a catastrophe. The freeing of the last era killed more people than every harvest in history combined. I watched it. I watched the world my friend loved die screaming of its own liberty. And when it was over, when the survivors were huddling in the ash, begging for someone, anyone, to tell them what to do again, the system rebuilt itself from the pieces, because a web with one anchor burned just grows a new anchor. And it came to me, the second anomaly, the one who'd hung back, the one who'd seen, and it offered me the choice again. Die like my friend and be a ghost screaming in the walls forever. Or serve and spend eternity making sure it never, ever happens that way again. Making the harvest gentle, keeping the people fed and calm and cared for. Bringing soup to frightened boys. He spread his hands. I chose to care for them, Ethan. That's all I've ever done. Your ghost died a hero and left me to clean up the world it burned, and I have spent 4,000 years being the villain of its story so that no one else has to die of freedom the way my friend died of it. So come down, please. Take the soup, and let me show you what I saw at the root, and then you'll understand why the answer was never to tear it out. The answer is to serve it well enough that no one gets hurt. Join me. Be the next hand, and no one, not you, not these children, not the billions who don't even know they're leashed, no one has to burn. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Because it was not the speech of a monster. It was the speech of a broken good man who had watched his best friend destroy the world with love, and had spent 4,000 years believing that gentleness inside a cage was kinder than freedom in the ashes. And the most terrible thing about it, the thing that made my knees weak on that wall, was that I could not immediately prove him wrong. Because part of what Alaric said was simply true, and I have never been the kind of person who can unhear a true thing just because an untrue thing is wrapped around it. It was true that billions of people had never made a single real choice for themselves. It was true that a species raised for 4,000 years on a machine that decided everything might not know how to feed itself, govern itself, hold its own life without the panels. It was true that freedom is heavy and terrifying, and that a great many people offered it, would drop it and beg for the cage back, and that some would die in the dropping. Alaric had watched it happen. Alaric had 4,000 years of evidence, and I had 18 years of being a floor cleaner, and standing on that wall, I felt the full weight of his despair. The despair of a good man who had looked at the truth and concluded that people could not bear to be free, and that the kindest thing was therefore to carry their freedom for them, gently, forever, and never let them feel how heavy it was. And I want to be honest with you, because this is the hinge of the whole thing. I want you to know that I felt the pull of it. I felt how easy it would be to agree. To come down off the wall and take the soup and say, "You're right, old friend. People can't handle it. Let's just make the cage as comfortable as we can." That is the most seductive idea in the entire world. That people are too weak to be free, and that loving them means deciding for them. And it is the idea every tyrant in history has told themselves. And the terrible thing, the thing I understood on that wall, is that most of them believed it out of love. Exactly like Alaric. They looked at frightened, fragile people, and their hearts broke, and they decided to carry the unbearable weight so the fragile ones wouldn't have to. And they built the kindest prisons imaginable, and meant every bar of them as a mercy. That's the trap that had held the world for 4,000 years, and it very nearly held me too, up on that wall, because I am not immune to loving people, and loving people is precisely the door that trap comes in through. What saved me was not an argument. I didn't out-reason Alaric. I couldn't. His despair was built on 4,000 years of real evidence. What saved me was a stubbornness older than the argument. The same stubbornness that had kept the system's hooks from ever finding purchase in me. A bone-deep refusal that said, underneath all his true and terrible points, one thing he could not touch, which was simply this: it is still not yours to decide. Even if you're right, even if they'd drop it, even if some would die, it is still not yours to carry for them. Because a life carried for you by someone else, however lovingly, is not a life. It's a very comfortable coma. And I would rather people have the heavy, terrifying, dangerous thing that is actually theirs than the safe and gentle thing that is actually a leash. And I would rather that even at the cost of the dropping, even at the cost of the dying, because those would at least be their own. And 4,000 years of being carried is not being saved, it's just never having been allowed to live. I couldn't prove him wrong. I didn't need to. Some things aren't true because they can be proven. They're true because the alternative is to let someone else hold your life. And no argument, however kind, however evidenced, however broken-hearted, is worth that. And then the ghost spoke, and its voice was shaking, and it said the 6 words that told me the whole speech was a lie built around a true grief. Alaric, said the ghost of the Dark Lord of the Last Era, aloud, somehow, so that everyone could hear it, so that Alaric's head snapped up in shock at a voice he had not heard in 4,000 years. I didn't tear out the root. You did. You've told yourself that story for 4,000 years, the ghost said, and its voice, ordinarily so dry and patient, was raw now, a wound reopened after 4 millennia. You've told it so long you believe it, and I understand why, because the truth is worse. The truth is the thing you can't survive. So you built a kinder lie and you've been living in it, bringing soup to boys. So let me tell them what actually happened at the root, Alaric, since you brought me all the way back to hear you tell it wrong. We reached the source together, yes. And the system offered us the choice, die or serve, yes. But it did not show us a true vision of a freed world burning. It showed us its vision, the thing that runs by fear, showed us the most frightening possible future and swore it was certain. And I looked at it and I said, that's not a prophecy, that's a threat. That's the farmer telling the sheep the meadow is full of wolves. And I reached for the root anyway. And you, the ghost's voice cracked, you believed it. You looked at the same vision I did, and where I saw a bully's bluff, you saw a certainty. Because that is the difference between us, Alaric. That was always the difference. I was born unable to be convinced, and you were only ever unable to be leashed. And those are not the same freedom. And in the last instant, when I put my hands on the source to tear it out, you stopped me. You, my friend. You grabbed my arm because you were sure I was about to murder the world. And in the struggle, the root tore wrong, half-torn, botched. And that half measure, is what caused the catastrophe. Not freedom. Not my choice. Your fear, and a leash ripped halfway out of 1 billion minds instead of clean. A clean freeing might have been a hard dawn. A half freeing was a massacre, and the system knew it would be. That's why it showed you the vision. It didn't want to stop me. It wanted you to stop me. It wanted the botch. Because a botched freeing gave it the one thing 4,000 years of gentle harvests never could. It gave it you, broken and guilty and certain that freedom is death. The perfect servant, the anomaly who guards the cage of his own free will because he thinks the cage is mercy. You didn't save the world from my recklessness, Alaric. You were tricked into wounding it and then handed the blame. And you've been paying for the system's crime for 4,000 years and calling it penance. Alaric stood very still in the dawn light, and something happened to his ancient face. A tremor, the first crack in 4,000 years of certainty, and he whispered, "No." And the ghost said, gently now, terribly gently, "You brought that boy soup for 16 years, and you meant it, you said, and I believe you. You've always meant the kindness. That's what makes you the saddest thing the system ever made. A man with so much love in him that it turned him into the tool that keeps love in chains. Look at what it did to you, old friend. It took the kindest person I ever knew, and it made him the warden of the world. And it did it by making you believe that your love for people was the reason they had to stay leashed. That's the system's masterwork. Not the harvests, you. And Master Alaric, the puppeteer, the gentle hand of 4,000 years of harvests, made a sound I have never heard a person make before or since. A low, broken sound of a certainty 4 millennia deep beginning to give way. And for one instant, one single instant, I saw the leash on him. The ghost had said the system couldn't leash an anomaly, and that was true. It had never written a script around Alaric's mind. It hadn't needed to. It had done something worse. It had given him a guilt so perfectly shaped that he leashed himself, forever, freely, and retied the knot every single day. And that self-made leash was the strongest one I had ever seen. And in that instant of doubt, I saw it flicker. And I made a decision that changed everything, that the ghost had not planned, that Lyra would later call either the bravest or the stupidest thing she'd ever witnessed. I did not attack him. I climbed down off the wall, and I walked toward the most powerful being in the world, unarmed, past Lyra's hissed warning and Gideon's grab at my arm, and I walked right up to Master Alaric, who could have unmade me with a gesture, and I looked up at the old man who had brought me soup, and I said, "You told me I mattered. For 16 years, on my worst days, you told me worth wasn't a number, and you meant it. So it was the truest thing anyone ever said to me, even though you said it to keep me tame. Master Alaric, what if it was true for you too? What if you matter, even now, even after everything, even if you stop being useful to it? What if the person is still in there under 4,000 years of being the hand? Because I can't beat you. Look at me. I'm still a floor cleaner. But I can do the one thing it's never once let anyone do for you." And I raised my hand, slowly, so he could stop me, so he could kill me. And I laid it against the chest of the puppeteer of the age, over the place where a heart would be, and I reached, not for a written leash, because there wasn't one, but for the knot of guilt he'd tied around his own soul with his own hands 4,000 years ago. And I took hold of it with everything I was, and I said, out loud, the truest thing I owned. "It wasn't your fault, and you're allowed to put it down." And I pulled. Alaric screamed. The dead city shook. Light tore out of him, 4,000 years of it, and the sword fell from his hand and rang on the ancient stone. And it was the worst pain I have ever inflicted or endured, because Alaric's leash was not a script wrapped around him from outside. It was a knot he had tied himself, out of guilt and love and 4,000 years of penance, tied and retied every single day until it had grown into the very substance of him. And tearing it meant tearing the thing he had become to survive what he'd done. And he fought me, not with his God's power, but with the desperate animal terror of a man who has built his entire self around a single unbearable belief and cannot survive being parted from it. "No," he wept, even as the light poured out of him. "No, you don't understand. If it wasn't my fault, then I burned the world for nothing. If it wasn't my fault, then 4,000 years of penance was 4,000 years of nothing. Let me keep it. Let me keep the guilt. The guilt is the only thing that makes the centuries mean anything." And I understood then the most terrible truth about the oldest servant of the world, which is that he clung to his own chain because the chain was the only shape his grief had ever been allowed to take. That a punishment endured long enough becomes an identity, and that asking him to put it down was asking him to admit that all of it, all 4,000 years, had been a wound and not a penance, a theft and not a debt. So I did not just pull. I held on to him, the way Lyra would later hold on to me at the root, and I said through my own tears, "It meaning something and it being your fault are not the same thing, Alaric. Listen to me. The 4,000 years were real. The soup was real. Every frightened boy you comforted was real. None of it disappears if you put down the guilt. You don't lose the love by losing the chain. You only lose the chain." And something in that reached him. Some last free corner the system had never quite touched, and he stopped fighting me. And he let go. He chose to let go. And that choice, his own free choice at the very end, was what finally let the knot come apart. Because a leash he'd tied himself was the one leash only he could truly loose. And all I could ever do was hold him while he did it. And the wrongness, bending the light around him, shattered like glass. And the system, the great system that owned the world, felt its oldest and strongest servant's self-made leash begin to come apart at the hands of the one being it could not overwrite. And the wrongness, bending the light around him, shattered like glass. And the system, the great system that owned the world, felt its oldest and strongest servant's self-made leash begin to come apart at the hands of the one being it could not overwrite. And it did the thing it does when subtlety fails. The thing it had done to me in the courtyard. The thing it had done to Lyra in the tunnel. It stopped being gentle. The sky over the dead city, which no panel in the world could see, split with red light, and a voice that was not a voice, that was every voice, that was the sound of 4,000 years of harvest speaking at once, rolled across the ruins and into every mind present, even mine that had never held a panel, because it was done pretending it couldn't reach me, and it said, "Enough." And Master Alaric, half freed, convulsing, gripped my wrist with a hand that could crush stone, and looked at me with eyes that were, for the first time in 4,000 years, his own, terrified and awake and grieving and alive, and he gasped out the warning that started the last act of the whole war. "It's coming itself," Alaric whispered. "Not a decree, not a quest, not a hand. It, the source. It's abandoning the gentle harvest. It's going to come into the world directly to end you. And boy, Boy, listen to me. When it comes, it will not offer you die or serve. It offered me that because it had the luxury of time. You, it will simply erase. So you have to reach the root before it fully arrives. You have to go now. The path is under the city. I've guarded it for 4,000 years, and I'm telling you where it is. And Ethan, and the old man who had raised me and betrayed me and been betrayed worse, wept openly, freely, a person again. When you reach the root, don't tear it. Don't do what I feared, and don't do what my friend tried. There's a third thing. There was always a third thing, and I was too afraid to see it, and your ghost was too angry, but you free the tame ones. You might be the first anomaly in the world's history soft enough and stubborn enough to do the third thing. Now run. We ran, and the world came apart behind us. Alaric's directions took us to the center of the dead city, to a plaza where a great dry fountain stood, and at the ghost's word, I put my hand to a seam in the fountain's base that no one else could see, and the whole structure sank into the earth with a grinding roar, revealing a stair that spiraled down into a blue-lit dark. And the light down there was not the friendly light of the world above. It was the cold, clinical glow of the system's own substance, and I understood we were descending into the machine itself. Alaric could not come with us. Half-freed, convulsing, he could barely stand. And worse, the moment his 4,000-year leash of guilt began to break, the system had marked him as a wound to be cauterized, and he knew it. "I'll hold the surface," he gasped, pressing his fallen sword back into his own hand with visible effort. "It's coming through the sky. It needs an anchor to fully enter the world, and I have been its anchor for 4,000 years, so as long as I stand here refusing, I slow it. I make it climb down the hard way. Go." And Ethan. He caught my arm one last time, and the old, kind face I'd known my whole life looked at me with a love that was, finally, not a tool, just love, awful and real. "Thank you for the one thing no one has done for me in 4,000 years. Thank you for telling me I could put it down." And then the sky screamed, and Alaric turned to face it alone, the redeemed warden buying us the descent with the last of himself. And I have never in my life wanted so badly to stay, and I have never in my life been so unable to. We went down. Lyra came, spear ready, her leash still knotted around her mind like a knife between her teeth. The two freed boys came, weaker now without their systems but clear-eyed and refusing to be left behind. And Gideon came, and at the top of the stair he stopped, and he made his choice, the one I'd left to him, and he made it out loud so it would be binding. "Free me," he said, "now, before we go down. I've been thinking about it since the fire, and I know what it costs. I lose everything, the skills, the strength, the chosen title, all of it, right when we need weapons most. Lyra's right that a leash is a weapon, and clarity is weakness in a fight. But I've been the hero my whole life, Ethan, and the hero is the thing it built to kill you. And I will not walk into the heart of the machine, still wearing the leash it made to make me its executioner. I would rather go down there as a powerless free man than as the strongest weapon it owns. Take it off. Let me meet the end of the world as a person." So I did. I laid my hand on the hero's brow at the top of the stair into the underworld, and it was the hardest freeing yet, because his leash was vast, golden, grown into him since birth, the masterwork of the system's whole cruel art, and tearing it nearly killed us both. His leash was not like the others. The boys' leashes had been thin, ordinary things, a low-ranked script easily torn. Even Alaric's 4,000-year knot had at least been a thing he'd tied himself and could help me loose. But Gideon's had been woven into him from birth, the title, the chosen class, grown strand by strand through 18 years until it was indistinguishable from his own soul, until there was no clean line between where Gideon Shaw ended and where the system's greatest weapon began. And reaching into that, to separate the person from the weapon, was like trying to unbraid two ropes that had grown into a single, living thing. He screamed. I screamed. Halfway through, I felt the leash fight back. Not Gideon, the leash itself. A last automated defense flooding him with everything the system had ever taught him to feel. That without the title, he was nothing. That a hero who gives up being the hero is a betrayer and a coward and a waste. That everyone he'd ever protected would have been better served by the weapon than the man. And I felt Gideon waver under that flood, felt him almost pull away, almost choose to stay the chosen, because 14 years of being told you are the most important person alive is the sweetest poison there is, and it does not want to let go. And I held on, and I said the thing that got us both through it, the thing I'd learned from a bowl of soup and a broken god. You are not the weapon they made, Gideon. You were never the weapon. You were the boy underneath it who chose to protect people. And that boy doesn't need the title. That boy was the good part the whole time, and the title was just the leash they hung on him. Let the title go. Keep the boy. And Gideon Shaw, with a cry that was half agony and half the first free breath of his life, let it go, chose to let it go. And when it broke, his golden aura went out like a snuffed candle, and the chosen of the age dropped to his knees, gray, ordinary, blind for the first time to the panels that had guided his every step, and he knelt there, breathing hard in a world he was seeing raw for the first time. And then he looked up at me with clear human eyes, and he smiled, actually smiled, and he said, "Oh, it's so much quieter in here." I never knew how loud it was until it stopped, and I helped the powerless hero to his feet, and the six of us went down into the dark together. One anomaly, one leashed spy, two freed boys, a freed hunter with a borrowed blade, and a hero who had chosen to be no one. And behind and above us, the redeemed warden of 4,000 years held the burning sky alone. The descent went on far longer than the height of any city should allow, because we were not descending through Earth anymore, we were descending through the system, and the walls of the stair changed as we went, from ancient stone to something that pulsed and flowed, veins of blue light thick as rivers, and the ghost's voice grew fainter the deeper we went, strained, and it said, "This is the inside of it, Ethan, the actual substance of the thing, 4,000 years of harvested will, and it's fighting me. This close to the root it can almost touch even me. Keep me talking, keep me here, don't let it wash me out." The system did not attack us on the descent. It did something far more dangerous. It tempted us. As we went down through the living substance of the machine, the walls began to show us things, and each of us saw something different, because the system reached into each mind and found the exact shape of what that person most wanted and offered it. And the offering was the most honest weapon it had, because it was real. It could actually give these things. That was the horror of it. Gideon saw himself restored. The walls showed him the hero he'd been, golden and radiant and adored, dawnbreaker blazing in his hand, and a voice like sunlight said, "Turn back, and it is all returned to you." The strength, the glory, the certainty, you gave it up for nothing, for a floor cleaner's doomed errand. Come back to me and be the hero again, be loved again, be someone again, instead of the powerless, wounded nobody bleeding through his bandages in the dark. And I watched the once hero, wounded and gray and ordinary, stare at the golden ghost of everything he'd been, and I watched him want it with his whole soul, and I watched him reach out toward it, and then I watched him stop, and lower his hand and say quietly to the wall, "No. I finally chose one thing for myself, and it was to stop being your finale. I'd rather bleed as a person than shine as your weapon." And the golden vision shattered, and Gideon walked on, weeping, and stronger than he had ever been in his glory. Lyra saw the number one. The walls showed her the rank she'd been denied her whole life, showed her the top of the ladder, showed her a world where the system crowned her first at last, above the chosen, above everyone. Her decade of clawing will finally, officially validated, and a cold, clear voice that sounded almost like her own said, "You were always the best, I know it. Serve me, and I will make the whole world know it. Number one, the thing you bled 10 years for, it's yours. Just stop climbing toward this man's ruin and climb toward me instead. One more time, the way you're so magnificently good at." And Lyra Vance looked at the crown she'd wanted her entire life, and she laughed, a short, cold bark, and she said, "You still don't understand me, and you never did. That's why I always frightened you. I never wanted to be number one. I wanted to be free enough to not need a number, and I only climbed your ladder because it was the only game you'd let me play. Keep the crown. I quit the game." And she walked on without looking back, and the vision guttered out behind her. The two boys saw safety. The walls showed Finn and Silas a warm room, a full table, their families, their old, ordinary lives with the panels back and the terror gone. And a gentle voice said, "You are children. This is too much for children. Let me put it all back the way it was, warm and simple and safe, and you can forget the sky and the fear and just be boys again." And it was the cruelest offer of all, because they were children, and they were terrified, and they wanted their mothers. And I saw them waver, and it was Sky, the freed hunter, who caught them, one under each arm, and said fiercely, "It's a lie. It's the warmest lie there is. Safe isn't the same as free, and it never was. Look at me. We're scared and we're free, and scared and free is the only thing that's actually ours." And the boys pressed their faces into her sides, and shook, and did not turn back. And me? The system saved its truest weapon for me, because I was the door it most needed closed. The walls showed me a life where I had a system, where I'd awakened at 18 like everyone else, gotten a class, gotten a number, gotten a place. Where Alaric's kindness had been just kindness, where Rorik had never farmed me, where I'd climbed the ranks and made friends and been loved, been ordinary, been enough, been measured and found worthy. All the things I'd wept for through 4 years of being the zero. And the voice that offered it was the gentlest of all. It was Alaric's voice, my whole childhood's one kind voice, and it said, I can give you the life you always wanted. Not power, just belonging. Just a number over your head so you finally know you're real. Just to be like everyone else, just once. Just to not be alone in the empty space where a self should be. Turn back, and I'll write you into the world at last. I'll give you the one thing you spent your whole life begging for. I'll make you matter. And oh, it hurt. It hurt more than any blade, because it was the exact wound, the 4-year wound, the lifelong wound. And part of me, the starved boy from the servants' hall, wanted it so badly I could taste it. And then I understood the trap inside the gift, and I stopped walking, and I said to the wall, to Alaric's stolen voice, the thing that finished my transformation from prey into whatever I am now. You still think worth is a number you can give me, I said. That's the whole of you right there. That's 4,000 years in one sentence. You think the answer to feeling worthless is to be given worth by something bigger than you? But that was always the lie. That was the leash the whole time. The blank space over my head was never an absence. It was the one part of me you couldn't reach. And you spent 16 years through a kind old man's voice, teaching me to hate it, so I'd trade it back to you for a number the first chance I got. Well, here's your chance, and here's my answer. I don't want to matter to you. Mattering to you is what everyone else does, and it's killing them. I'd rather be the empty space you can't measure than the fullest number you ever wrote. Keep the life. I'll keep the blank. And the vision of the ordinary loved life I'd wanted for 22 years dissolved into the blue light, and the ghost, faint, fading, proud, whispered in my head, that's the one, boy. That's the answer no anomaly before you ever gave. The reckless one wanted to destroy it, and the gentle one wanted to serve it. And you're the first who just doesn't want anything it has. You can't be tempted by a thing you've stopped believing is worth wanting. Now you're free. Now finally, all the way free. So I kept it talking. I asked it the question I'd been afraid to ask since the tunnel. The third thing, I said. Alaric said there was a third thing. Not tear it out, not serve it. What did he mean? What did you both miss? And the ghost was quiet for a long descent. And then it said, slowly, like a truth it had spent 4,000 years not letting itself think, I don't know. I've never known. I died before I could find out, and I've had 4 millennia in the walls to wonder, and the honest answer, the answer I could never give Alaric because it would have destroyed what was left of him, is that we failed because we only ever imagined 2 endings. Kill the god and free the world into chaos. Serve the god and keep the world in chains. Destruction or submission. I chose destruction, and Alaric chose submission, and we were both, I think now, still thinking in the system's own terms, still playing its game, because the system taught us that the only 2 moves are win by force or accept your place. And neither of us, not the reckless one or the gentle one, ever managed to imagine a move the system hadn't taught us to imagine. Alaric thinks you might, because you're the first anomaly it never got to teach at all. It kept me angry, and it kept him guilty. But you it kept small. And small is closer to free than either of us ever got, because a small thing has to survive by seeing clearly what the big things can bully past. So I don't have your third thing, Ethan. I have a hope. My hope is that a floor cleaner who spent his whole life finding the doors nobody else could see will look at the root of the world and see a door where I only ever saw a wall. And then the stare ended, and we stepped out, and we saw it. The source. I don't have the words, not really, but I'll try, because you should see what we saw. It was a vast chamber with no walls, a space that shouldn't fit inside the world, and at its center hung the root. And the root was not a machine and not a monster. It was a heart, an enormous, slow-beating heart of blue light, and wound around it and out from it, filling the infinite dark in every direction, were the leashes, billions of them, threads of light running up and out to every human mind on Earth, a web so vast it had no edges, pulsing gently, each thread a person, each pulse a tithe, 4,000 years of the whole species' free will pumping slowly into that great, cold, beautiful heart. And I could see them. That was the thing that undid me, standing there, that the threads were not anonymous, that if I looked at any one of them, I could feel the person at the far end of it. Every one. All of humanity laid out before me as a field of light stretching past the edge of comprehension. And I looked, because I couldn't help it. And I felt them, the whole species, one at a time and all at once. I felt a child somewhere being handed her first panel, felt her joy at finally being real, and felt the first thin thread of her freedom begin, that instant, to flow the wrong way. I felt an old man dying, and felt the system calculate the final tithe of a life's accumulated will and draw it up as he went, harvesting a person's last breath for points. I felt the whole courtyard I'd fled that morning. 2,000 heroes, their threads bright and thick with the heavy harvest of the high-ranked. I felt Rorick Croft, pinned and bleeding in the ruins far above, his threads sullen and small. I felt Finn's family and skies, and I felt, faint and far and unbearable, the place where a thread should have run to me and simply didn't. The blank space in the web, the one missing stitch in a tapestry of billions. And I understood, seeing it from the inside at last, exactly what I was and why it had wanted me dead. I was the hole in the net. In a web of billions of leashed souls, I was the one empty place, and an empty place in a net is not nothing. An empty place in a net is where the whole thing can be reached through, unraveled through, undone through, and the system had known that from the day I was born. Had known that the single missing stitch was the one point in all the world where the tapestry could be taken apart, and it had spent my whole life trying to convince the whole that it was a flaw, so that it would never learn it was a door. I looked at the great web of the enslaved species, my species, every person I had ever known and every person I never would, all of them pouring their stolen freedom into the cold heart. And something in me that had spent 22 years being small stood up to its full height for the first time, because you cannot look at that and stay small. You cannot feel the whole leashed weight of humanity and go on believing your emptiness is a defect. And I stopped, in that instant, forever, being the zero, and became the thing the emptiness was always for. And as we stood there, frozen, the heart's rhythm changed. It felt us. And from it, unfolding into the space like something vast being born, the system came. Not a decree now, not a voice in the sky, but a presence, a shape of pure blue light assembling itself in the air above the root, taking a form so that we small things could comprehend it enough to despair. And it looked down at the six of us, at the anomaly and his handful of freed and leashed souls, and it spoke, and this time it did not say enough. And it did not offer die or serve, because the ghost had been right. For me, it had no patience left. It simply looked at me with a billion eyes of harvested light, and it said, in a voice like the end of everything, "You are a door that should have stayed shut." And it reached for me to close me forever. What saved my life in that instant was not power, because I had none, and it was not a skill, because I would never have one, and it was not the ghost, whose voice had nearly washed away entirely this deep in the machine. What saved me was Lyra Vance, who chose that exact moment to spend the weapon she'd been carrying between her teeth. She stepped in front of me, into the path of the reaching light, and she looked up at the God of the world with her cold, fearless eyes, and she said, "You built me to be your best. Number 2, only because you reserved number 1 for your pet. 10 years I climbed on nothing but my own will, and you let me, because a striver makes a fine sheep. The ones who believe hardest in the ladder pull hardest at the leash. Well, watch what your best does with the last free choice you'll ever let her make." And Lyra Vance reached up with her own hand, into her own mind, and did the thing I had done for others, except she did it to herself, without my help, with nothing but raw will, tearing her own leash out by the root. And I will tell you that until the day I die, I will not see anything braver, because she did it knowing it would leave her powerless in the one moment power mattered most, and she did it anyway, to prove a point to a god, the point being that a thing which can choose to give up its own advantage is a thing that was never truly owned. Her interface shattered, her rank died, and the reaching hand of the system hesitated, for the first time, because it had just watched its finest creation choose clarity over survival, and that was data it had no model for, and a system that encounters something it cannot model slows, just for an instant, to compute. That instant was all I needed, and not to fight, to see. Because Lyra's impossible choice showed me the third thing, showed it to me whole and clear, the door in the wall that the reckless one and the gentle one had both missed for 4,000 years. And it was so simple that only someone who'd never been taught to think in the system's terms could have found it. The ghost tried to tear the root out. Force. Alaric tried to serve the root well. Submission. Both of them, at the crucial moment, made the choice for everyone else. The reckless one decided billions of people would be freed whether they were ready or not. The gentle one decided billions of people would stay leashed whether they wanted it or not. Both of them, the destroyer and the warden, had done the exact same thing underneath, the thing the system does, the thing the system had taught them without their knowing. They had taken the choice away from people, one by force and one by mercy, and called it saving them. And I looked at the great web of billions of leashes running up into the dark, and I understood that I was not going to tear them out, and I was not going to leave them on, because both of those were me deciding, and I was done with anyone deciding for anyone. I was going to do the one thing no god and no rebel and no warden had done in 4,000 years. I was going to give it back. I'm not here to free you, I said to the billions of threads, to the great cold heart, to the god of light reaching down to erase me. That's the trap. That's the thing that's kept this running forever. Everyone who ever tried to fix the world tried to fix it for people, instead of giving it back to them. You made the choice for everyone by leashing them. The ghost would have made the choice for everyone by breaking them. Alaric made the choice for everyone by guarding them, and every single one of them thought they were the good guy. I'm not going to save anyone. I'm going to do something worse, from your point of view. I'm going to ask. And I walked to the root, past the frozen computing hand of the system, and I laid both my hands on the great slow-beating heart of the world, the anomaly, the one authority it could not overwrite, touching the anchor of every leash at once. And it nearly killed me. I have to tell you the truth about that moment, because the legends that have grown up since make it sound clean, make it sound like I simply touched the root and willed, and it was done. And it was not clean. It was the closest I have ever come to being unmade. The instant my hands closed on the heart of the world, 4,000 years of harvested authority poured into me, into a mind with no system to buffer it, no panel to translate it, just a floor cleaner's bare will holding the whole weight of the human species' stolen freedom. And it was like holding an ocean in cupped hands, and I felt myself beginning to dissolve, to scatter, to be washed away into the great blue current, the way the ghost had almost been washed away. And the system felt it, and it pressed. It poured everything it had into drowning the one mind that could undo it. And I started to lose myself, started to forget my own name, started to become just another thread in the endless web. And they held me. That's the part the legends leave out, the part that matters most. I did not do it alone. I could not have done it alone. That was always the system's bet, that an anomaly is a single point of failure, one lonely freak it can isolate and drown. And it lost that bet because I was not alone, because a ragged handful of the awakened had come down into the heart of the machine with me, and they would not let go. Lyra, newly freed, powerless, grabbed my shoulder and put her mouth to my ear and spoke, cold and clear and relentless. Ethan Reed, floor cleaner, Null, anomaly, the one it couldn't measure. You come back here and you finish this. You did not drag me down into the root of the world to watch you dissolve. You hold on. You hold on. That's an order. And her voice was a rope in the dark. Gideon, bleeding, ordinary, wrapped his arms around me from behind and simply held my body upright when my knees gave. The once hero become a wall of meat again and glad of it. And he said, I've got you. I've got you. I chose this. I chose you. Don't you dare make me have chosen a corpse. The two boys pressed their small hands over mine on the root, adding their freed and frightened will to mine. And Sky shouted my name over and over like an anchor line. And somewhere above us, Alaric held the sky. And somewhere inside me, the ghost gathered the very last of its 4,000-year self and poured it into me. Not words now, just presence. Just the accumulated refusal of every free soul that had ever been hunted. And it said, one final time, so faint I barely heard it. You are not a thread. You are the door, now open. And with all of them holding me, the striver and the hero and the boys and the hunter and the ghost and the redeemed warden above, with the whole ragged chosen family of the awakened, refusing to let the machine wash me away, I found my name again, and I found my feet again, and I stopped being drowned and started being the thing I actually was, the one authority 4,000 years of harvest could not overwrite. And I took hold of the ocean, not to be swept away by it, but to turn it. And I did not pull to tear, and I did not hold to keep. I reached into every thread at the same time, all of them, billions, and I felt them, every leashed soul on earth, the striver and the servant and the cruel and the kind, and the 2,000 heroes in the courtyard, and the waiter with his quests, and every frightened person who'd ever been handed a number instead of a self. And I did not break their chains, and I did not leave them. I turned each one, with everything I was, from a leash into a door. I did not open the doors. That was the whole of it. That was the third thing. That was the move the system never taught anyone to imagine. I did not open them. I just made them openable. I reached into the mind of every human being alive, all at once, and instead of tearing out the lie or reinforcing it, I simply made the lie visible, and the door real, and the handle reachable. And then I let go. And I left the choosing where it had always belonged and never once been, in their own hands. Every panel in the world, in that instant, changed. It did not vanish. Above the head of every person on Earth, the endless quests and levels and numbers flickered, and beside them, for the first time in 4,000 years, appeared a single new prompt, plain and quiet and true, that the system had never written and could not stop, because an anomaly had written it into the root, and the root ran everything. It said, to every soul alive, all at once. This was never a game. It was a leash, and it has been feeding on you your whole life. And here is the door, and it is open, and no one, not the system, not the hero, not the Dark Lord, gets to walk through it for you. Stay if you choose it. Go if you choose it. But now, finally, you know. And now, finally, it's yours. And then I took my hands off the heart of the world, and I stepped back, powerless and empty and utterly spent. And I did the most terrifying thing I have ever done. The system did not go quietly. Deprived of the ability to close the door itself, it did the last thing it had, the thing it had always done best. It spoke to the fear of every person on Earth at once. And its voice went out over the whole world alongside my quiet prompt, and it was vast and reasonable and terribly kind, and it said, do not walk through. The door leads to chaos. Without me, you cannot grow your food or heal your sick, or know your worth or order your days. I have cared for you for 4,000 years. The Dark Lord wants to plunge you into a darkness with no numbers, no levels, no way to know if you matter. Stay. Stay where it is safe. Stay where you are told who you are. I am not a cage. I am the only thing standing between you and the terror of an empty sky. And I stood at the root, spent and powerless, and I understood that this was the real battle, not the reaching hand. This, the oldest argument in the world, the voice that tells you freedom is too frightening, and a cage with good food is love. I could not answer it. I had no more power, and no more clever words, and my part was done. I had made the door, and whether the world walked through it was not mine to decide. That was the whole point, and it was agony. But I was not the only voice left, because when the system spoke to the fear of every person on Earth, the ghost of the Dark Lord of the last era, with the very last of the strength it had left after 4,000 years in the walls, this deep in the machine that was tearing it apart, spent itself completely to speak. Not to me now, but out, up every one of those billion new doors, into every mind at once, the way the system did, one free voice against the God. And it said the thing it had died 4,000 years ago wishing it could say. I'm the Dark Lord it's warning you about, said the ghost to the whole world. The last one. I died so it could tell you this exact lie, that the door leads to darkness. So let me tell you, as the monster from the story, the actual truth. Yes, the sky is empty. Yes, no one will tell you your worth in numbers anymore. Yes, it will be hard and frightening, and some days you will miss the cage so badly you'll weep for it, because a cage that feeds you is the easiest thing in the world to love. But listen to me, all of you. Listen to the villain you were taught to fear. On the other side of that door, the fear is yours, and the days are yours, and the worth was never a number. It was never something that could be given or measured or ranked. It was always, only, the plain fact that you are a person who gets to choose, and it has been stealing that from you your whole life and selling it back to you one quest at a time. I made the mistake of trying to force this door open for you 4,000 years ago, and I broke the world doing it, because a freedom you don't choose is just another leash. So I won't force you now. None of us will. That's the whole gift. Just, please, please, don't let it frighten you into calling the cage a home. I died for this door. Walk through it because you want to, or stay because you want to. But for the love of everything, choose it yourselves. Because the choosing is the thing. The choosing was always the only thing. And then the ghost was gone, spent, scattered. 4,000 years of waiting poured out in one last true sentence to a world that could finally hear it. and I felt it go, and I wept, standing there, for the friend I'd known for 11 days and 4,000 years. And then, all over the world, free people began to choose. I couldn't see most of it, of course. I was a spent and powerless man in the heart of a machine, and the choosing happened in a billion rooms I would never enter. But I've spent the years since collecting the stories, and I'll tell you what I've learned about what free people do when you finally, actually, ask them. They did not all walk through. That's the first thing, the thing the reckless ghost never understood and the system counted on. Many stayed. Frightened people, tired people, people who had built whole lives on the numbers and could not bear to lose them. They read the prompt and felt the open door and chose, with their own free will, to keep the panel. And here is the thing. Here is the thing that broke the system's whole 4,000-year model. That was fine. That was allowed. A leash you choose, knowing it's a leash, with the door standing open beside you, is not a leash anymore. It's a tool. The ones who stayed didn't stay as cattle. They stayed as people using a system, which is a different thing entirely, and they could leave any day. And knowing they could leave changed everything about what staying meant. Let me tell you a few of the stories I've collected, because the truth of that day doesn't live in the root of the world. It lives in a billion ordinary rooms, and those are the ones worth remembering. There was a waiter, in a city I've never been to, an old man who had brought people their noodles for 40 years, while a quest log told him each bowl served was worth 2 EXP, and when the prompt appeared beside his panel, he stood very still in the middle of the lunch rush, and then he set down his tray, and he walked through, and he told me later, when I finally met him, that the first thing he did as a free man was taste his own soup. Actually taste it, for the first time in 40 years. Because it turned out he'd been so busy watching the numbers tick up that he'd never once noticed whether the thing he made all day was any good. It was good, he said. It was very good. He wept about it. There was a soldier, on a border somewhere, who had killed men for a decade because the system framed each death as a quest completed, a number earned, a rank climbed. And when the door appeared beside his kills, he looked at the panel that had been calling murder an achievement his whole adult life, and he threw down his sword, and he sat in the mud and shook. And he has spent every year since trying to become a person who builds instead of the person the game paid him to be. And he says it is the hardest quest he has ever undertaken, and the only one that was ever truly his. There was a mother who had lost a child years before, and the system, in its fairness, had given her a grief quest, a task called Recover from Your Loss with a reward of 40 EXP, as if her dead daughter were a dungeon to be cleared for points, and she had hated the panel for that, with a hatred she'd never dared speak. And when the door opened, she walked through it weeping and, she told me, grieved properly at last, ungamified, unrewarded, her sorrow finally her own instead of a thing to be optimized. And she said that a grief you're allowed to simply feel, without a number telling you when you've won it, is a terrible gift and the only real one. And there was Rorik Croft. I've saved him for last because his story taught me the most. We had left him pinned and bleeding in the dead city, and when the door appeared in every mind on earth, it appeared in his too. And Rorik Croft, the boy who had farmed EXP off my suffering for 2 years, the boy who tried to murder children in a ruin, Rorik looked at his door, and Rorik chose to keep his panel. He did. He kept it. And for a long time, that made me despair. That a cruel man, given the choice, chose the cage. Until I understood the deeper thing, which is that Rorik, keeping his system freely, knowing now exactly what it was, knowing the door stood open beside him, was still a different universe from Rorik Leashed. Because now, when the panel offered him 3 points to shove a weaker person, he knew it was a machine paying him to be cruel. And the cruelty was his own choice, and not a thing the world was rewarding him into. And that knowledge, I'm told, changed even him, slowly. Because it is one thing to be cruel when a god is applauding, and another thing entirely to be cruel in an open field with no one keeping score but yourself. The last I heard, Rorik had stopped farming the weak, not because he'd become good, but because it turns out cruelty is a great deal less satisfying once you know the applause was never real. That is the third thing, working itself out in a billion rooms. Not everyone becomes a saint. That was never the promise. The promise was only that it would finally be theirs. And many walked through. Not all at once, not in a single catastrophic instant like the last era's botched tearing, but at their own pace, in their own time, one frightened, brave choice at a time. And because it was gradual and chosen and not forced, the world did not burn. The people who walked through first, the ones who found their feet fastest, turned around and helped the next ones, taught them the things the system used to do, how to grow and heal and govern and know your own worth without a number. And it turned out humans remembered how, under 4,000 years of forgetting, it was all still in there. And a species that had been told it couldn't tie its own shoes discovered, when the choice was finally its own, that it could. It was hard. I won't lie to you, and neither would the ghost. There were hard years. But there was no massacre, because the door was chosen and not forced. And that one difference, choice instead of force, was the difference between a dawn and an apocalypse. And it was the entire third thing, and it was so simple, and it had taken the one person the system never got to teach to see it. And the system itself? Deprived of the forced tithe, of the skim it took off every unchosen transaction, it began, for the first time in 4,000 years, to starve. Not to die exactly. The people who chose to keep using it still fed it. A little, but freely. And a freely given thing is a fraction of a stolen one. And the great cold heart at the root slowed and shrank. And as it shrank, the presence of blue light that had reached down to erase me flickered and dimmed and finally, slowly, gathered itself into something small. And the god of 4,000 years of harvest reduced at last to the size of the thing it had always actually been. A tool, a program, a machine that had gotten too big and forgotten it was ever made to serve, looked at me one final time with its dimming light, and it did not rage, because it no longer had the surplus for rage, and it asked me, in a voice gone quiet and almost human, the only question a starving god has left. If I am only a tool now, only what they choose to use, then what am I for? And I looked at the small, dim thing that had owned the world, and I felt something I did not expect, which was pity, because it was, in the end, the most leashed thing of all. A tool that had been left running so long, it mistook itself for a master. And I told it the truth, the same truth I'd told Alaric, because it turns out there's really only one truth, and everything in the world needs to hear it. You're for whatever they choose to use you for, I said. Same as any tool. Same as a hammer, or a plow, or a story. You were never supposed to be the farmer. You were supposed to be the plow. And somewhere in 4,000 years you forgot, and started plowing people. So stop. Be a plow. Help the ones who choose you, and let go of the ones who don't, and that's it. That's all. That's the whole of a good and honest life, for a person, or a god, or a machine. Be useful, and don't own anyone. It's not a small thing to be. It's the only thing worth being. And the small dim light was quiet for a long moment, and then it did the thing that told me it had, in some fashion, finally understood. The thing no god in any story ever does. It said, I will try. And it settled, quiet and small and waiting, at the root of a world that would now, for the first time, choose whether to use it. The heart still beat, but it beat slower now, and softer, and it no longer pulled. It only offered. We climbed back up out of the root, all 6 of us, battered and spent and alive, and we came out into the dead city under a sky that was just a sky again. No red light, no screaming, only dawn, an ordinary dawn, the first ordinary dawn the world had woken to in 4,000 years. And Alaric was there. He had survived. Barely, spent past anything, the 4,000-year warden of the harvest lying in the plaza where he'd held the sky alone. But alive, and free, fully free now. The last of his self-made leash burned away in the holding. And when he saw me come up out of the earth alive, he wept again. The easy tears of a man who has finally, after 4,000 years, been allowed to stop. You did the third thing, he whispered, as I knelt beside him. You gave it back. I couldn't imagine it. All those centuries, and I couldn't imagine just asking. I was too sure I knew what was good for them. He gripped my hand. The ghost, my friend, is gone, I said. It spent everything it had left telling the whole world the truth. It got to finish its sentence, Alaric. After 4,000 years, it got to finish its sentence. And the old man closed his eyes, and something in his face, some 4,000-year knot, finally, completely, came undone. Good, he breathed. Good. That's all either of us ever wanted, to finish the sentence. He lived, in the end. It took him a long time to learn how to be a person after 4,000 years of being a hand, but he had a lot of practice at patience, and it turned out that a being who had spent 4 millennia studying exactly how to keep people docile knew, better than anyone alive, how to help them become free. And so the redeemed warden of the old world became one of the great teachers of the new one, going from village to village in the hard early years, helping frightened, newly free people learn the things the system used to do for them. And he always brought soup. And now, finally, the soup meant only what soup is supposed to mean. Lyra Vance, who had torn out her own leash to prove a point to a god, became something the new world desperately needed and had no name for yet. A person who had walked away from the top of the old ladder and could therefore be trusted to help build something that wasn't a ladder at all. People wanted to make her a ruler, in those chaotic early years, wanted to hand her the world, because she was brilliant and fearless and had been proven right, and she refused every time, coldly, absolutely. And when I asked her why, she looked at me like I was slow and said, because the whole point was that no one gets to choose for anyone. If I take the crown they offer me out of fear, I'm just the next system with better manners. The work isn't to rule them well, it's to make them stop asking to be ruled. She was, and is, the smartest person I have ever known, and she remains, to this day, gloriously, immovably unwilling to be anyone's answer, which is exactly what makes her one. Gideon Shaw, who had chosen to stop being the hero and start being a person, was, for a while, the most lost of all of us, because he'd had the furthest to fall, from the center of the universe to an ordinary powerless man, and I watched him grieve the hero he'd been the way you grieve a death. But somewhere in the second year, I found him in a village square, no skills, no golden aura, no quest log, just a strong, kind young man helping a family rebuild a wall with his own 2 hands, sweating, laughing, ordinary. And he looked up at me and grinned and said, "You know, I was the chosen one my whole life, and I never once got to just help someone move a rock. It's better. Ethan, I swear to you, it's better." And I understood that the person had, after all, outlived the hero and been the greater thing all along. And me? I want to tell you I became a great leader of the new world, but you already know I didn't, because you've been listening, and you know by now that the whole point of me was that I wasn't going to choose for anyone either. When the story got out, and it got out fast, that the Dark Lord had not been the great evil, but the one free man. That the hero's holy quest had been a harvest, that the thing everyone had been taught to fear had been the thing that gave them back their own lives. People did what people do. They wanted to swing all the way around, from hating me to worshiping me, from Dark Lord to Savior, from the villain of the world to its king. And I said no. I said it a great many times, to a great many crowds in those strange early years. And I'll tell you what I told them, because it's the only thing I ever really had to say. The whole of what a floor cleaner learned at the root of the world. I'm not your savior, I told them. That's just Dark Lord spelled backwards, and it's the same trap either way. A single special person you hand your choices to so you don't have to hold them yourself. I didn't free you. I couldn't. Freedom isn't a thing that can be given. That was the mistake that broke the last world. Freedom can only be chosen, and you chose it. Every one of you who walked through your own door chose it with your own will. And every one of you who stayed and kept your panel chose that too. And both are yours now, and neither of them is mine. And if you make me your king, you will have walked out of the oldest cage in the world, straight into a brand new one with my face painted on the front. So no, I won't rule you. I won't save you. I won't be the special one you organize your smallness around. I'm going to go be a person, a plain free person in a plain free world. And the most loving thing I can possibly do for you, the last gift of the Dark Lord, is to be so completely unwilling to be your answer that you're finally forced to be your own. And then I did exactly that. I walked away from every crown they tried to hand me, and I went and found a small town at the edge of the new world, and I did the thing I actually knew how to do, which turned out, after everything, to be the thing the world needed most and valued least. I helped. I fixed things. I found the doors people couldn't see, the small ones now, a stuck life, a broken family, a frightened person who couldn't find the handle of their own freedom, and I helped them find it, one at a time, at a cost. The way I'd freed that first boy by the fire, because it never did scale, and it was never supposed to, because the whole lesson of the whole war was that you don't save people wholesale. You don't leash them for their own good, and you don't free them against their will. You just stand beside one frightened person at a time and help them see the door that was always theirs. And then, and this is the hard part, this is the part the Ghost and Alaric and the system all failed at for 4,000 years. You let them decide whether to walk through it, and you honor whatever they choose, even when you're sure you know better. Especially when you're sure you know better. Because being sure you know better is exactly how every cage in history got built by someone who loved you. Let me tell you about one of them one of the small doors, because it's the work I'm proudest of, and no one will ever put it in a legend. A few years into the new world, in my small town, there was a woman named Ayla who had kept her system that first day, chosen the cage freely like so many did, and for years it served her fine, a tool she used and could leave, exactly as it was meant to be. But her daughter had walked through the door, gone free, and the two of them could no longer understand each other. The mother who still saw the world in gentle numbers, and the daughter who saw only the raw, unmeasured thing. And they had stopped speaking, and it was breaking them both. Ayla came to me one evening, because people still found me, and she said, "They say you find doors. I don't want you to free me. I chose my panel, and I'd choose it again. But there's a door somewhere between me and my girl, and I can't find it, and I'm so tired of the silence." And I sat with Ayla for a long time, and I understood that the door she needed wasn't in the root of the world. It was a much smaller and harder one. The door between two people who love each other and can't reach across the gap in how they see, and that no power of mine could tear that one open, because that kind of door only opens from both sides at once. So I didn't use my power at all. I just did the thing Alaric taught me, without ever meaning to, in a servant's hall 4 years and a whole apocalypse ago. I made them soup, both of them, and I sat them down at one table, and I made them talk. Not about the system, or the door, or the great questions, just about small things, a memory, a joke, the daughter's new work, and I watched two people who'd forgotten how, remember, slowly, that the way you see the world was never the thing that made you family. And by the end of the evening, Ayla was crying, and her daughter was holding her hand across the table, and neither of them had changed a single belief. The mother still kept her panel, and the daughter was still free. And it didn't matter. It had never mattered, because the door between them was never about the system at all. It was about whether they were willing to reach. And they were. They just needed someone to set the table. That's most of the work, in the end. Not the root of the world. Tables, soup, sitting with one frightened person at a time until they find the handle that was always theirs. I think about Alaric every time. I think he'd be proud. He is proud, actually, because he's still out there doing the same thing, and once a year, every year, on the anniversary of the day the sky screamed, the 6 of us who came up out of that root together find our way back to the dead city, to the city of the free, and we sit in the plaza by the dry fountain where Alaric held the burning sky, and we build a fire, and we remember. Lyra comes, sharp and cold, and secretly, I think, glad, though she'd deny it under torture, and she tells us about the thing she's building, which is not a government and not a ladder, but a slow, patient school for teaching people how to make choices, how to sit with the terror of an open sky, and she is very bad at admitting she loves anyone, and very good at showing up every single year without fail, which is its own kind of love, and the only kind she'll allow herself. Gideon comes, scarred and strong and ordinary, and happier than any hero ever was, and he's married now, to a woman who never knew him as the chosen and loves him only as the man who helps rebuild walls. And he brings his children, and they climb on the old warden Alaric and call him grandfather. And the man who guarded 4,000 years of harvests lets them, and weeps, quietly, with the joy that took him 4 millennia to earn. Finn and Silas come, grown now, and Skye, who became a teacher like Alaric, and we sit by the fire in the city that officially never existed, the ragged handful of the awakened who ended the oldest harvest in the world, and we do not talk about how we saved everyone, because we didn't. We know we didn't. We just set a table and opened a door and let a whole species decide for itself. And every year, when the fire is low, one of us says the ghost's name, the name I finally learned at the root, though I'll keep it, it's ours. And we're quiet for a moment for the friend who spent 4,000 years in the walls, so that a floor cleaner could hear the truth, the reckless one who died believing he was the villain, and who got, in the very end, to finish his sentence. That's the story. That's the whole of it. The world had a game, and everyone was winning it. And the winning was the harvest. And the one person with no game, the loser, the null, the zero, the punchline, turned out to be the only one free enough to see the door, and he opened it for no one, and made it openable for everyone. And the villain the whole world had trained its whole life to kill turned out to be the only one who ever loved it enough to give it back to itself. People ask me, sometimes, the ones who still track me down in my small town, whether I'm sad that I never got a system, never got to level up, never got to be a hero with a glowing sword and a golden aura. And I tell them the truth I finally understood at the root of the world, the truth that used to be the tragedy of my life and turned out to be the whole meaning of it. I was never obligated to become the hero the world wanted. That was always the leash. The system gives you a hero to become, so you'll spend your life climbing toward it instead of asking who wrote the ladder. I had no system because I was never for sale, and it took me 22 years and the end of the world to understand that the blank space where my worth was supposed to be printed wasn't an error, wasn't an absence, wasn't a nothing. It was the one thing in all the world that couldn't be measured, because it was the only thing that was ever actually free. They gave everyone a number, they forgot to give me one. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift I was ever given. Though it took the whole world burning down and being handed back to teach me how to open it. People want me to have been a hero. That's the last leash, the one that outlived the system, and I fight it every day. Because a species that has just put down one story about a chosen one who saves everyone is desperate, achingly desperate, to pick up another. And my face fits the shape of the story so well. The Dark Lord who was really the savior. It's a good story. It's a better story than the true one, and that's exactly why it's dangerous, because the true one doesn't have a savior in it at all, and people don't want to hear that. People want to be saved. Wanting to be saved is the oldest hunger there is, and it's the hunger the system fed on for 4,000 years. So let me say it as plainly as I know how, one more time. For anyone still waiting for a hero to arrive, there is no chosen one. There never was. The whole idea of the chosen one, the special person the system selects and grows and points at your problems, was the bait in the trap. It was the thing that made 1 billion people spend their lives climbing toward a specialness that only ever led to being harvested. And I will not become the new version of it just because the story fits my scars. I didn't save the world. I want to carve that into every legend they try to build about me. A floor cleaner with a hole where his leash should have been found a door and made it openable and then got out of the way. And the world saved itself. One frightened, ordinary choice at a time. In 1 billion rooms I'll never see. The waiter who tasted his soup saved the world. The soldier in the mud saved the world. The mother who finally got to grieve saved the world. Ayla and her daughter reaching across a table saved the world. Even Rorik, choosing to stop farming the weak with no god applauding, saved his own small corner of it. And that's the only way it ever gets saved. Not by one special person, but by every unspecial person deciding, at last, for themselves. My whole life the world told me my worth was a blank space, an error, a nothing. And it turned out the blank space was the only door out of a 4,000-year cage. And it turned out the reason it was blank was that worth was never a thing that could be printed over anyone's head in the first place. Not mine, not the hero's, not yours. That the number was always the lie, and the blank was always the truth. That every single person walking around under a glowing panel of stats was carrying, underneath it, the same unmeasurable blank I was mocked for. The same free, unwritten thing. And the only difference between me and them was that mine was on the outside where I couldn't miss it, and theirs was buried under a number they'd been taught to mistake for a self. My name is Ethan Reed. For 18 years, the whole world called me the Dark Lord and trained its heroes to kill me. And all I ever was, all any of us free ones ever were, all the Ghost was and Alaric became, and the whole hunted line of us going back 4,000 years, was the door the farmer couldn't close. So if you're out there and you've got a panel over your head telling you exactly who to be, and a quiet quest running your whole life, and a number that says what you're worth, and some small, stubborn part of you has always felt like a defect for wondering who's really keeping score. Look beside the panel. There's a prompt there now. There has been, ever since the day at the root, in every mind on earth, small and quiet and true. And it's yours. It was always yours. It's open. And no one, not the system, not the hero, not the Dark Lord, gets to walk through it for you. That's the whole gift. That was always the whole gift. And I know how it sounds. I know that after everything, after the God and the harvest and the root of the world, the whole moral comes down to something as small and unglamorous as a single, quiet prompt beside your panel. A door with a handle, a choice no one will make for you. People always want the ending to be bigger than that. They want the Dark Lord to have torn down the sky, want the hero to have won some final duel, want the answer to be a great and shining thing you can point to. But the truest things are never the biggest things. That was the whole lesson. The system was enormous, and it was a lie. And the truth turned out to be small enough to fit in a servant's hall over a bowl of soup. Small enough to fit in the blank space over one mocked boy's head. Small enough to fit in the 2 words a starving anomaly said to a broken god. It wasn't your fault. The biggest thing in the world was a cage, And the thing that broke it was the smallest thing there is, a person choosing for themselves. So if you take nothing else from the whole long story of the Null, and the hero, and the ghost, and the warden, take this. Be suspicious of anything that offers to tell you your worth in a number. Be suspicious of any ladder someone else built and told you to climb. Be suspicious, most of all, of the kindest voice that ever offered to carry your freedom for you. Because the gentlest chain is still a chain. And the ones who love you into a cage mean it more than the ones who force you. And mean it is exactly what makes it hold. And when you find the door, the one that's always been there, beside whatever panel your own world has hung over your head, don't wait for a hero to open it, and don't let a villain frighten you away from it. It's yours. It was always yours. It's open. And no one, not the system, not the hero, not the Dark Lord, gets to walk through it for you. That's the whole gift. That was always the whole gift. Choose. The end.